the committee of the whole agenda over to our city administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is Brandy Zetwick, request for resident-only parking.
I don't see her in the audience.
But there is a letter in your packet.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm sympathetic to the challenges of living on a residential street in the city of Virginia, as I live on 8th Street, and I too hear vehicles that start at 2nd Avenue, and I can hear them drive all the way over towards the mall. A residents-only sign, I don't think would solve the problem over there. The residents who live in Pine Mill Court are also residents of Virginia, and it would not exclude them from parking on that street. And I know we've been working on looking at parking and looking at how it affects the traffic flow everywhere. And now that the county building's done, I know we've been waiting to do some studies and to try to figure out parking. The map of where you can park for how long is as colorful as a rainbow is, and I think that's something that we've discussed before that we're going to be addressing in the future. So, and seeing that the resident isn't here to explain, I don't feel we need to take any action on this at this time.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Johnson. Councilor Paulson, any comments? Shion. Councilor Paulson, any comments with respect to this request from Brandy Zetwick?
Austin, you broke up a little bit.
Yeah, any comments about this request from you, Councilor Paulson?
Not getting anything.
Okay, how about Councilor Beyondich? Are you on the line, Councilor Beyondich? Pardon?
They're talking, but we're not getting them.
Okay, well, let's move to Councilor Barnzelli. Councilor Barnzelli?
Thank you, Mayor. How will he enforce this? Parking resident only.
Well, that's the big issue we need to discuss, I think, moving forward. A resident-only parking, whether or not is enforceable and would have to be done by permit. In some of the problems we've had in the past with respect to cars parked in front of that didn't have a permit, but were visiting the residents, and then a citation was issued, it became an issue. So I think, to Councilor Johnson's point and others, that we need to take a look at the overall parking structure through our street and alley committee and move toward finding some resolution. But I think Councilor Johnson's indication, which I concur, is that we should take no action with respect to this until we determine what our parking reorganization is going to be, or adjustments or modification of that parking environment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have Councilor Bearable?
Yeah, Steve, once we get done with the feasibility study that's coming up here for residents on Thursday at the Miners, the Street and Alley Committee, along with Britt, will be starting to look at parking. We just haven't done it now, but this is on the agenda and we haven't forgotten about it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have the other councilors available, Britt?
Beyondich was going to call back in again.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Austin looks like she's on, but 1 second. We're having an issue.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Kind of. Hang on 1 second. Okay, can you hear me now, Pam?
why the audio.
Okay, Pam, we can kind of hear you. Let us try for now.
Okay, Counselor Paulson?
Mayor, can you hear me now?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, I could hear the entire time. And the only statement that I had is that I would agree with Councilor Johnson's statement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Beyondich? Yes, we can. Okay, so looking for a motion to table or to deny? We should just move to table until we figure out the parking situation before we move forward, but I leave that up for council action.
I'll make a motion to table pending further evaluation of parking throughout the city.
Thank you. Move to table by Councilor Freely. Is there support? Support by Councilor Bonzelli. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'd like you to note or do a roll call, see who's here today. She didn't get that.
Okay, yeah, we didn't have her on the line, so. Okay, Pam, would you please take the roll call?
Present.
Here.
Here.
Present.
Present. All councils and the mayor are present. Thank you.
And the next item on the agenda is Bob Voss from Rock Ridge Public Schools regarding a temporary no parking on 6th Avenue for the bus drop-off area.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Voss, would you please come forward and turn the microphone on to the green? And then please announce your name and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting.
Morning, my name's Bob Voss. I'm Transportation Director for the Rock Ridge Public Schools. The anticipation of the school year starting, we surveyed our parents about school's gonna go on as usual. So we surveyed our parents about busing and found out that most of our parents, a good portion of the parents are gonna choose not to use the buses for the school year. How that will play out, we'll have to wait and see. But it's going to create more traffic in the area. So what we're requesting is, we already have a no parking zone on 6th Avenue from 3rd Street to 4th Street next to the Virginia High School. We're asking that we get a temporary zone, that the city council grants us a temporary zone from 3rd Street to 2nd Street next to the mural in the Roosevelt Gym from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday during the school year, and then take a look and see what happens next year, but at least a temporary one for this school year.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. I did have a conversation with Principal Speltz. He made a preliminary inquiry. I advised him to get a hold of their people, particularly Mr. Voss, and let our city council know, particularly Britt C. Bennis, about putting you on the agenda today. He explained to me the circumstances surrounding that. So I will look for the council for any discussion with respect to this request by the school. I support it. I think we have to make some adjustments to accommodate in-person learning and whatever traffic issues we have to accommodate. So that being said, looking for other councilors' concerns, comments, questions, or motions. Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, Mr. Voss, I have no issue with doing that. That will give you 360-degree drop-off for the school right now. And with parents, more parents going to drive it, that's going to create a lot of traffic backup. And 6th Avenue is busy enough as it is. So I agree that the parking should not be there along the gym area, which should be drop-off.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. This will be a significant change to decades of of school parking. Can we direct Chief Mattson to have an officer out there maybe the first couple of weeks of school, so that we don't have to be writing tickets the first week of school, just get people moving, or maybe your staff can be out there. Because, and I appreciate the explanation, because the way it looked like you wanted on both sides, but you just want the part by the new gym, what I would call the new gym.
Roosevelt,
Okay.
just next to the Roosevelt Gym.
I think I would move the request to grant the no parking between the hours of 7 and 4 on school days.
I'll support.
A motion by Counselor Johnson to approve the request by Rockridge Schools for the additional parking adjustment for the school year from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, supported by Counselor Baraboo. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Paulson, any further discussion?
Is there, since the parents are mainly voting to not do busing, will that leave any option or opening on Fifth Avenue for parents to pick up in front of the school?
Yeah, we're trying to decide whether we should move the buses to Sixth Avenue or keep them on Fifth Avenue. The only problem that I can really see with the buses on Sixth Avenue is there isn't a lot of swing space on the avenue. And what I'm afraid of is side swipes to buses and those types of things. We did have one situation last school year where something was going on, I think it was at City Hall or something, and we chose to have the kids come out to Sixth Avenue side of the building. There were real traffic jams there and problems there. It was a one-day thing. So we haven't quite figured that out yet, but at the very least, we're going to need it for parent drop-off.
Mayor.
Great, thank you so much for that, I appreciate it.
Okay. Counselor Beyondich, any comments or questions with respect to the parking request by Rockridge Schools?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Baraboo?
Yeah, Mayor and Mr. Boss, being chair of Street and Alley for many, many years, I'm dead set against those buses on Sixth Avenue. You've got the space, you've got the whiteouts on Fifth Avenue where the buses can park and traffic can still move, but that'll be a nightmare if buses park on Sixth. It's not a wide enough street. So I think you need to relook at that completely. Parents are fine because you'll have the parking lane for them to drop off now, because that won't be occupied for vehicles parking.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and supported to approve the request by Rockridge Schools to block off designated parking for pickup and drop-off on along Sixth Avenue by the school gym with the codicil within that motion for our city staff to work with the police department to help coordinate with the school, in the initial part of the school year, ensure that parking is those notifications are made to the general public with the request of the police officer. So all that can be coordinated through our city administrator and her staff, through Brittany and her staff. And is there any other questions or comments before we vote? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Voss.
Thank you so much.
You have really good taste in Tupperware there.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is Doug Foshee and a request for reimbursement of garbage fees.
Mr. Foshee on the line?
No.
Mr. Foshee is not present, and he's not participating in Zoom. You have information
The packet.
in your packet. So,
We do have a Public Works Director, Ed Alto, here that I believe.
hey, yes, thank you. Ed, would you please come forward and, for the minutes, Pam, Ed Alto, our Public Works Director, to give information with respect to the request by Doug Foshee.
Mr. Foshee contacted the utilities 8/3 of this month and requested that his garbage be taken off. I've heard nothing from him since January. That's what he wants the rebate for. So he didn't request anything. He's not here to say his side of the story, so
And normally what happens when the building becomes vacant, you have to go to the utility, there's a form you have to fill out, there's a certain amount of time you have to be vacant, and I think was it 2 months? And then the charges get dropped. We don't do a reimbursement, we do a drop of the fee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Britt. Thank you, Ed.
Rob?
Questions, comments, concerns, action by the council? Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your input, Mr. Alto, because in his email, he says repeated attempts have been made to various city departments since the closure, and it appears that we don't have any emails or phone messages about that. So I would make a motion to send Mr. Fauci a letter instructing him the proper procedure to declare his building unused moving forward.
Okay, a motion by Councilor Johnson. Is there support?
I'll support, Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Support by Councilor Bearable for discussion. Further discussion? Any councilor have any further discussion? First, we'll go to the phone. Councilor Paulson, any further discussion?
That the procedure should be followed.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Beyondich?
So I feel pretty much the same way. I know it's a difficult time for everybody, but I think that we should stick to what the procedure is for this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a request for Public Works for capital purchases, and I will call upon Ed Alto again.
Again, Ed Alto, our Public Works Director. For finance number 4A, the purchase of a 2020 GMC 2500 regular cab pickup truck and snowplow. Ed?
Correct. This truck is sitting at Washke's right now. They do have a work truck there, and we did have this in our capital for this year. So this is already covered, and then I'd like to order one from Iron Trail for next year, which would be in next year's budget.
And that would be item number 4B.
Correct.
Okay, let's take action on 4A. Sherry, is there money in the capital equipment budget for the purchase of this 2020 GMC?
Yes, there is. We did not spend all of our insurance money.
Okay, very good. Okay, so money is there to purchase. Okay, thank you. Council action, questions, comments, concerns?
I'll move the purchase of the pickup truck, snowplow.
Thank you. I'll move to approve the purchase of the 2020 GMC 2500 regular cab pickup truck with snowplow in the capital equipment budget for 2020. Is there support? Support by Councilor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, Ed, are we replacing trucks?
Yes.
And what will happen to those older trucks?
Sell them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Any further discussion? Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, this truck is basically to do alleys and
Plow
parking
truck.
lots. Plow
Plow
truck for the alleys, basically because of the size.
They'll both be plow trucks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Moved and supported for finance number 4A. Once again, the purchase of a 2020 GMC 2500 regular cab pickup truck with snowplow, which is in our capital budget for 2020. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 4B. Ed?
This will be a new truck for next year's budget.
And
Ordered, it will be paid for in 2021.
you'll have that in the 2021 capital equipment budget requests.
Correct.
And you need to order it.
They're 12 weeks out minimum.
Okay.
First truck will get in service this year.
Mm-hmm.
The next one will be for the winter after.
For the winter after. Very good. Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
I would move purchase of the 2021 Chevy Silverado from Iron Trail Motors.
Okay, the motion to authorize the order of the 2020 Chevrolet Silverado regular cab, which should be 2021 capital expenditure. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Councilor Bearable. Is there any further discussion?
Just one question, Mayor.
Yes, Counselor Bearable.
So you're not planning to use this till the fall of '21, or you're going to use it in the winter of '21?
Second truck will be for the winter of '21.
Okay, so starting in January then?
Yep.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other further discussion? Britt?
Yep. And I just want to point out that Ed mentioned we'll sell the trucks, so that money goes back into the fund where we purchase the trucks. So we will do a public surplus for the trucks that we're getting rid of and retain that money.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
The next item on agenda under finance number 5 is approval to apply for a public health and innovation funding grant, and we have Chief Lewis here to discuss that request.
Chief Lewis, our fire chief and emergency management director. Morning, Chief.
Morning, Council. Good morning, Mayor. This is a St. Louis County Public Health Innovation Funding grant. This is a non-matched grant. This is a $100,000 grant, or up to $100,000 grant that we can apply for. It's directed towards public health, especially with mental health. I've had conversations with Range Mental Health to form a type of a partnership. And so the needs that this would meet, would be the unmet needs that are currently out there for a lot of mental health people in the initial access to the system. You have people that they call 911 for a mental health emergency. They get transported by an ambulance, which isn't the appropriate vehicle to do so, but it's the only one they have. They go to the ER, they sit there for a few hours, maybe a mental health bed becomes available, maybe one doesn't. We have a very, very broken system when it comes to mental health care. What this model, this funding would be applied toward would be as you saw in your packet, there's a CAHOOTS model in Eugene, Oregon. That's a service that I was formerly employed with. And I used that service frequently when I was on the streets and called to a medical call that really was more of a mental health call. They had 2 fully staffed vehicles with a mental health worker and an EMT that would come to the scene, and you could literally hand the patient off and they would direct, whether it was detox, whether it was a mental health immediate crisis intervention, whether it was more long-term care. There's other things that come in too that people might not think of, such as food insecurity and some things like that sometimes when people call 911, they're literally out of options and they don't know what else to do. And it maybe they don't have any food or that they don't have any medication. So a lot of these things that end up being 911 calls could be prevented. The focus of a unit like this would also be preemptive care before something happens. To visit some of the known users of the system, to check on people. Hey, do you have enough food? Do you have enough? You're taking your medication. So it would almost be an extension of a community paramedicine type of program with a focus on mental health. I've seen it from the operations side be very, very successful in meeting the needs of these. These are individuals a lot of times who don't want to deal with law enforcement, maybe because they've had negative experiences in the past, and they certainly don't really want to deal with fire EMS because that isn't really addressing their needs. A CAHOOTS model like this with a mental health person and an EMT allows that person to be directed to where they need to go rather than directed to where they will pay to go. Right now, we only get paid when we transport people to the hospital. There's no other funding mechanism for EMS out there that is currently. So I guess my permission is to ask the council to apply in partnership with Range Mental Health for this grant, realizing that there's no fiscal cost to the city at this point. $100,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is a good start. But when you start talking about staffing a model, even for a 40-hour week, you have to get additional funding. So part of my job that I would like to do is reach out to other partnerships that have non-matching type of grant funding and apply for those as well. I have several in mind. One's the Bush Foundation. They have grants of up to $200,000 that they will go. So if we can do a matching with the Bush Foundation rather than a city matching, I think that would be. So I'm pursuing other opportunities to gain it. There's even the possibility of a vehicle being donated. These are very, very preliminary discussions. An ambulance rolling up to scene on a mental health call is probably not visually what that person wants or needs. at that point either. So we want to have a nondescript, more low-profile vehicle, yet with the services that these people need. I guess, in short, my request to the council is that I proceed, or able to proceed in a partnership with Range Mental Health to go forward with application for this grant.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to, before we go to the council, I'd just like to comment that I'm sitting on the Range Mental Health Board, we've had these discussions over the course of the last 18 months, 2 years, about partnership with you, particularly with their mobile crisis team moving forward. But what I like about the grant itself is for public health with the mental health component. And by partnering with Range Mental Health, I think you have a better opportunity to get that grant because of the topic that's being discussed at the legislature about that funding source. I think it's a great opportunity moving forward. So I thank you for recognizing and making this request to apply for this grant, Chief. Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, the needs for this kind of service is overwhelming, and we're, I'm, excuse me, I'm guessing this is more than just a Virginia service, that this would be as much of our 500 square miles or whatever you guys cover. And I would just, I'm fully 100% in support of this. I wish that we could get the county on board because they have public health dollars available. Just the foster care alone, when one of our foster children are going through a mental health crisis, our options are to call the police or call an ambulance. And that's very traumatic for a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 15-year-old. And so if we can take this model and personalize it to the Iron Range and become a model for other rural areas would be phenomenal. I would just, as you're moving forward, I would ask, one, that we make sure we are partnering with the local law enforcement. That's really important. And I know you've probably already thought about this, but making sure dispatch is the proper training so that they're dispatching the right resources. And I know I'm speaking your language on this, but I just want to put it out there so everybody knows that that's what we're working on. That's when I used to work in a group home, and we had to call, this was in another city, the older a child is, the smarter they are when it comes to the police, and they will push those boundaries. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to bring me to jail? And everybody knows that a police officer is not going to take a 15-year-old in a mental health crisis to jail. Best they can do is talk them down a little bit. So to have a dedicated mental health crisis unit available, and you said 40 hours, and unfortunately, most crises don't happen at noon on a Friday. Usually it's Saturday night at 11 o'clock because it's bedtime. Whatever we can do to do this, I think, is exactly where we need to be. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I will move to apply for and accept grants and for further partnership, and to allow you to continue to seek further partnerships.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Johnson moves the request to approve the application for the Public Health Innovation Funding Grant.
I'll support.
Support by Councilor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Bearable first.
Chief, I'm assuming that once you get the funding, if it becomes available through these grant processes, that you will be working with a specific program for this area and bring that program back, how it's going to work, where it's going to work, if there's beds available in the area. Because I know I heard rumors that Essentia Health is going to be looking at some beds, but I don't know that for sure. So, because some of
I had a conversation with Sam Stone last week, and he denied that they were looking at expanding mental health bed capacity at the Virginia facility. But
they did. But I believe they're going to expand someplace. I understand, because there's a need for it. So we need to look at that and how you're going to operate. I want to see a whole program before you actually institute it. And I know it's going to be in a partnership, so it's got to be multiple units of care that will look at this.
Correct. It does no good to have one single link in the chain if there's no beds available for them to go to. So it's a holistic issue. To mention your point on the police department, yes, Chief Mattson and I have had discussions on this. She is very much in support, just because of the amount of time that it could save her officers on the street and getting the right access to these kind of care. The city of Eugene estimates that they save $14 million through this program. And that's by diverting, up to 18% of their police calls to a mental health team. So, yeah, it's a critical link, but it is a link in that overall holistic approach to mental health concerns.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And so this motion is, we all have questions about how the program's going to work. I know you'll come back and explain to us if the grant is approved, but the motion on the floor is to apply for the grant at this point in time. How you implement that grant and the cooperation to have and moving forward. It's a cooperative grant application between the City of Virginia and the Range Mental Health. And so we look forward to any additional information regarding how you're going to implement that based upon hopefully successful accrual or procurement of this grant. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Beyondich? Councillor Paulson?
Part of this. I do have a question though. I don't remember the actual title when we were partnering up with Duluth for the grant position to track overdoses. Did we ever follow through with that, or did that fall through?
Nope, there was a slight delay, partially due to COVID and partially due to some funding issues. They are interviewing on August 27th for that position, the opioid technician, and they hope to have them in place
Thank you.
by next month. Yep.
Okay, so it's the opioid technician. So that would lead me to my question. Would that be something that we could incorporate into this partnership?
Partnership, yes. The grant funding would be a separate stream of money, but mental health and substance abuse addiction do go hand in hand many times. So, yeah, there's definitely a resource that could be cross-utilized.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson. Councillor Beyondich?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and supported to authorize the fire chief to apply for the grant. This is the Public Health Innovation Funding Grant. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Chief.
Under Buildings and Grounds, item number 6, review requested upgrades to the park at 511 Chestnut Street, and I'm going to call up Ed Alto, our Public Works Director, again.
Is this the senior center request? And as a Public Works Director comes up, when I had our conversation with the staff down there, and then, of course, subsequent conversations that you met, when you met with the representatives there, I know there was a shock when the contractor gave me an estimate, just, not to be part of it, as to what it was going to cost, and there was some of a shock factor, but I think that cost was very accurate. Ed?
Pretty close. Question is Public Works going to do this? That's what I need to know.
Okay, thank you. I know that Councillor Paulson has asked where all our parks are, and our Park and Rec Director, Brian Sibber, did send out a list of all the parks that are in the City of Virginia, and that is considered a park under his definition and his authority. So I guess we're going to be talking about if we're going to do it, who's going to do it, and what the cost associated with it is. So that's the purpose of the discussion today.
This is way too large for just Park and Rec to do this. We would need to involve both Public Works and Park and Rec.
Of course, absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Johnson first.
Mayor, when we discussed this last time, I remember the question of using volunteers came up. Is that, can this be a partnership? Is it, I guess you know, we've been very good over the last few years of scheduling maintenance and upgrading our parks as we've gone around the city. We did Midway, which I have to say we went to last week, and is an amazing little park up in Midway. I fully recommend it, so does my daughter. You know, is this something that we need to look at and put on as part of the Parks and Rec upgrade plan so that we can give it our full attention, and instead of it being strung out over 2 or 3 months by volunteers, can we set a day where, or however it works, and then anything that the volunteers can do is set after that? So I guess I'm just looking for the best answer as we upgrade and take care of that.
Does,
Well, number one, does Brian have this in his budget? No. Out of Public Works budget.
That's a great question.
I mean, who's gonna pay for it?
That's a great question.
This is pretty labor intensive. I don't think volunteers would be the way to go. I think we should go down there if we're gonna do this. We'll go take the benches apart and pressure wash and clean it up and paint it. But I need a directive here to what we're gonna do and who's gonna pay for it. I mean, if Brian's not gonna pay for it out of his park fund,
Directive, he can, it just, this was not planned, we had not
Wasn't planned,
anticipated
no.
this.
so
What
go ahead,
is?
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have the letter. Am I missing the total cost? I see that the paint is $350 and landscaping is $500, but
Labor is the hard to estimate.
that's what we're looking at.
I think the paint's gonna be a little bit more than that.
Okay, because we would need to have high-quality industrial paint,
We're gonna
not,
have to prime it, we're gonna have to do some prep work. It's gonna take a little bit more than just buying the paint.
okay, because if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right, as we have been over the last several years.
Exactly.
So I guess I would like to see, for myself personally, us put this into the budget and do it right when we do it. If it can't be done this year, you know, maybe the seniors just make an effort to make sure the garbage is picked up and that kind of thing, and do the best we can this year. And then we build it into the budget as appropriate. I think one of the things that I thought of a lot about is the parks are where the kids play, and that's not necessarily true. Parks are recreational spaces used by anybody at any time, and so I think that's something that I would ask Brian to look at is, and then moving forward, what other park spaces need to be maintained and upgraded over the next several years. So I think that this is gonna just have to wait, unfortunately, till next summer or the summer after. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. I think the appropriate thing is to go through the budget for 2021, plan for the budget, get a planscape on what's going to cost associated with it, get that all done based upon the request to make sure that park is what they want it to be, what we want it to be, and that can't just be done piecemeal. I agree. I think we have to plan for it in next year's budget. I think it can wait, until next spring once we have a plan in place. Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, my concern is that we have the work scheduling done for the rest of the year of Public Works. This would affect some of the projects that are working on right now, and I have a concern about that we need to finish those up, because we got behind during the beginning portion of that COVID when we had people that weren't working, and Ed's in a catch-up position right now. So I agree, it needs to be put into the 2021 budget to work with and do and get the money appropriated for next year.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Paulson, any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you discussing my concern right from the beginning. And I guess what I would say is I do know that some of the people that have approached me have stated that this has actually been an issue for at least 2 years. So I understand that it's hard to estimate labor. Maybe this could be an economic development project. If we're improving something or maintaining something, maybe some of those dollars could come from economic development funding. But I do think that they have put forth a plan, and, they put forth potential volunteers. And the issue with money, it doesn't seem to be that expensive to do what they want. It's the issue of the cost of labor and whose budget that's going to come out of is what I'm understanding. And I do understand that there's been, setbacks with COVID, but I also want to respect the fact that they have been requesting this for quite some time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Paulson. Councillor Beyondich?
Thank you. No, I'm just taking in the dialogue and sorting this out a little bit. So I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the formal requests, I think I'm looking for a motion on how we're going to proceed moving forward. Again, I guess I'll throw my 2 cents in once again. I think this should be budgeted. I do agree with Councillor Johnson and others that we need to do this right the first time. And the concern that I have is that when you're putting together volunteers in Public Works and Park and Rec, and who directs and delegates these employees, and how does that work, and what's the extent of the volunteer, as opposed with the union contracts, as about maintenance and those kind of things. All those things can be taken care of, but we have to have a way in which to do this right the first time. And I don't want to have to set a precedent where, cleaning up the streets with the Marty Memorial, when you sweep the street, that's one thing. But when you're doing actual maintenance work and repairs, if it's going to be in this particular park, what happens in the other parts of the park that need additional, are you going to do that with volunteers too? So I think we're all sensitive of the concerns that the senior citizens have with respect to this. There's been some requests that have been real formal, talking to individual councilors. Now we're at the point where we do have a plan moving forward, and I think we have to implement that plan to do it right the first time. So I think that's my perspective as well. So I'm looking for a motion from the council.
Mayor, I'll move that we put this senior citizen request. I have never seen a formal request before in a written form like this from the senior citizens. I have to be honest with you. I don't remember. They've verbally said things, but we've never had a written formal request. So I would make a motion. We put this in the 2021 budget to have a coordinated effort to get this done as soon as possible in 2021.
Okay, thank you. Motion by Councillor Baraboo. Is there support? Support by Councillor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. No opposed.
Before you go, if it's okay, I want to jump down to personnel number 14. While Ed is still here, request to hire mechanic in Public Works.
Okay, thank you. Ed?
As y'all know, we lost a mechanic due to an injury in January. We've been running with 3 mechanics so far. Now with losing the Josh at the golf course, we're inheriting that equipment too. We're maintaining that. And now with winter coming up, it's gonna be pretty tough. I think we should put something out there to see if we can find a temporary mechanic or put somebody in there. John just went to the doctor, I believe it was last Monday, Brett? Yep. And he's at least a minimum another 6 weeks before he even has an appointment. He's only at 50% right now, so I think we better think about hiring a mechanic.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned taking over the golf course equipment as well, which puts this overburdens the mechanics you currently have working. I see that, they're working, try to catch up. They're always behind, but there's not enough personnel to do it. And I know that the golf course has been trying to find another greenskeeper that has a degree and or even without a degree, and there's no takers, none whatsoever. And I know that Mr. Fingers having a difficult time doing that. So somebody has to do the equipment. We're obligated to do so. The burden falls on your staff in which to do so. So you're making a request to hire a temporary mechanic, or?
I would go temporary right now till we get a definite answer on our employee that's out.
Mm-hmm. So as opposed to contracting some of the work out to an outside entity, you'd prefer to have the mechanic in-house to do it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any questions, comments, or concerns from the staff or the councilor? Councilor Bearable?
Yeah, I'm actually in a position as a counselor, being here all those years, I don't think temporary is the way to go, Ed. I think it's full-time. You're going to be leaving and you're a mechanic. So there's another lost body. Our potential person taking your place is not a mechanic. So you're actually losing maybe 2 people out of that department. We can maybe can't afford, but with the amount of money we save doing our own repairs and stuff, we've gone through studies in the past on that.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
maintenance on equipment, which makes it, our equipment lasts probably 2 more years longer than normal. That's so important for this city. That's my personal opinion. If the council wants to go temporary to start, fine, but they don't realize that you're a full certified mechanic also, and you do pitch in there once in a while when things go bad.
I do.
So I'm concerned about that. We're actually maybe going to lose 2 people.
Thank you, Councillor Bearable. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would ask Sherry about the difference between the temporary to see what happens in full-time and what your feeling is as what we might get for candidates and that kind of.
There really isn't much difference. It's just that with the temporary, whoever you get in there realize it's only a temporary position, which kind of lowers the morale or the enthusiasm to maybe do a better job than if you were full-time. I agree with Councilor Baraboo and the fact that Ed is going. He's more than once put on the overalls and gone in there.
Okay,
There, is there do we have like in the fire department, we have slots. Is there slots in the mechanics for this, or is this a new position, or how does that fit into the grand scheme of things?
In addition.
Would be an addition. We have 4 mechanics and 1 is out right now. So hoping he comes back. Fully released, but it's looking like it's a good year before that happens.
Are there any other potential transfers or retirements in the mechanics coming up?
Not that I know of in the mechanics, but I know in Public Works, there's a couple retirements pending that are coming up.
Pending.
And then people can just transfer as if they would like to, if they are qualified. Okay. Thank you for answering those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Paulson, any questions with respect to this?
No, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beyondich? Okay, thank you. Before we go back to Councillor Baraboo, you need somebody now, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, so if we advertise for a temporary and we don't get one, where are you at? Advertise for full-time, more likely you're going to get the candidates apply for a full-time position, knowing there's a salary benefit package, and it's a potential for a job moving forward. And, you'd be quicker, as my understanding from our city administrator, that we could do this. Sherry, our finance director, has answered Councillor Johnson's question about whether or not we should, can we do this? Do we have the money in the budget for that? There's some pending retirements. So, funding is an issue, wages is an issue, our staffing is an issue. But bottom line is, if you don't have the staff, you can't do the work. If you can't do the work, you can't operate the equipment. You can't operate the equipment, you can't maintain your thing. So it's just important for us to move forward with the hiring of full-time mechanic. That's the way I look at it. So, Councillor Baraboo.
Yeah, and exactly what you said, Mayor, and I'm going to make a motion that we move forward to hire a full-time mechanic for Public Works, because you can take a look at how they advertise. Mechanics are short up here on the Iron Range. They're very short
It's going to be a tough position to fill.
to fill,
Very.
because you got your mining companies coming back now, other things, and they're hiring, and people are leaving all the time, so mechanics are hard to find up here. I can tell you that from knowing some people that have taken jobs.
Okay, thank you. That's your motion to hire? Motion by Councillor Baraboo to move forward with the advertising to hire a full-time mechanic for the Public Works Department, which would be additional staff for our Public Works. Is there support? Okay, support by Counselor Paulson. Further discussion? Anyone?
Just one more point
Counsel-
there.
Counselor Bearable, and then we'll go.
Sherry, do
Counselor
we need
Brunzelli.
do we need to put in the motion, do we post internally and externally at the same time, or do we need an internal posting? First, okay.
That's required, yeah.
Okay, so that would be part of that motion, make sure we do the proper procedure.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor Bearable. Counselor Barnzelli, and then we'll move to Counselor Johnson. Counselor Barnzelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's the best to hire a full-time because down the road, we'll be retiring, some people, or one anyway. 20 years ago, I would have jumped on this yesterday. But I support this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the plug. You'd be a good mechanic, too. Knowing your, Counselor Johnson.
Thank you. I'm not remembering when we started the emergency procedures, we started a hiring freeze. Have we officially gotten rid of that hiring freeze as a council? Okay, so I would, I guess, I don't know what the proper procedure to do that would be.
Amend the emergency declaration to
We
authorize.
can't do that with a motion on the floor, though, can we?
I think we can, but maybe. Right, we're going to finish the motion we're at now, right, first, but we could still make a motion. Right, okay, so.
Okay.
But before you do, Counselor, let's ask our city attorney, Brian Lindsay. He's give us a little more information based on Counselor Johnson's requested comments. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. Just as a procedural matter, perhaps just out of cleanliness, what we could do is if the council, if the motion and support were agreeable to it, we could just add a contingency to this motion that it's contingent upon removal of the hiring freeze.
That's an excellent idea. I will amend that to my motion, original motion, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Pam, did you get that motion with the adjustment based on the recommendation from our city attorney that the recommendation is to hire a mechanic in Public Works contingent upon an adjustment to the emergency order? Thank you, and thank you, Counselor Johnson. Did that satisfy your issue? Thank you. Counselor Paulson, you have a question?
I had a hard time hearing the amendment to the motion, but my question was, so I guess I'd like some clarification on the amendment, and then my question was, are we still in a hiring freeze, and was that part of the question that
Yes, that was the part of the question that Counselor Johnson has, that under emergency order, we do have a hiring freeze in place. The recommendation from our city attorney, Mr. Brian Lindsay, is that we can, upon approval of this motion, he added a codicil to the motion, which was added by Counselor Bearable to approve the hiring of the mechanic with the contingent upon an amendment to the current emergency order that removes the hiring freeze to authorize this motion to move forward.
Very good. So I'll amend my support and agree with that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Counselor Paulson. So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
We'll go back up to Buildings and Grounds number 8.
If I
Discuss.
might,
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, Counselor Johnson.
I would make a motion that we amend the emergency order to eliminate the hiring freeze.
Thank you. Counselor Johnson makes a motion to amend the emergency order to accommodate, to remove the hiring freeze from the emergency order. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Counselor Freelieb. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Back up to item number 8, Buildings and Grounds, discuss use or disposal of paver stones from Alcott Fountain, and we have Brian Silber, our Park and Recreation Director, here to discuss this matter.
So we're not going to do on item 7 yet? We're just going to do, we're moving down to item 8.
Brian out here.
Okay, I'm on your frequency now. Okay, thank you, Brian's here. Brian, good morning.
Good morning, council. As you guys are all well aware, when the fountain restoration project took place, we removed a lot of paver stones from around the base of the fountain. Currently, we have a stockpile of between 1,500 and 2,000 of the paver stones. We have been using some of these paver stones in other projects around the park. We want to utilize some more to do an edge for a flower bed along the exterior of the greenhouse and a couple of other projects. However, in the meantime, I have been approached by a couple of citizens that would be interested in purchasing some of these paver stones. We've identified a need for about 500 of these stones, which leaves us well over 1,000 of the stones that are just sitting in a pile in the yard at this point, and wanted to see what the council's opinion would be about offering any of these stones for private citizens to purchase as for use in their personal property or as memory of the fountain itself.
Before we go on, we may want to have our attorney, Brian Lindsay, jump in on how we can dispose of these, because there is a protocol with the state statute and how you can get rid of property.
Right, and I'll wait for that because I have a couple comments. I'm sure the other councilors do as well. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. With regard to the sale of these pavers, as with any other city property, I think the first step would be to identify that these are surplus property that the city's no longer going to need. And then the other step, just to kind of put it generally, the next step is to make sure that we give anybody who may be interested an opportunity as opposed to just singling out certain individuals. And so that, I mean, those are the two main comments. And obviously, if these pavers are additional and aren't needed, we could declare them surplus, and then it's just kind of working out the details of what an appropriate sale would look like.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Appreciate it very much. If I can make a quick comment first, Councilor Bearable, thank you. Knowing the history, and you probably know more than anybody about the history of the properties being sold, and I'm just going to give you one example, and I could probably list you a dozen more, but I'm going to give you the primary example is when we had our street lighting. We had those street lighting on the Fifth Avenue. We had all this excess lighting there and the posts and the bulbs and all those kind of things. We thought, you know, we don't have any use for those anymore. Let's sell them. Let's get rid of them to the general public. And they got rid of those lights, and pretty soon there was a need for those in other projects throughout the city, and we didn't have them. And then we had to go purchase some, and they weren't exactly the same as the others. And I could tell you right across the street from my house, there's a lot of them along the roadway system where he was able to procure those. So even though the stones are sitting there, I think over time, they would likely have some landscape use in some regard within the city, but I'm comfortable with whatever the council majority concerns are and how they want to proceed. Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, I agree with our attorney, Brian Lindsay, that we need to declare surplus first. We do that with all the equipment that we bid out for surplus equipment, so we need to do it the right way, and that would be absolutely the right way to do it, Brian, so, both Brians. So that's my comment on that.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Councilor Johnson first, and then we'll go to the phones. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that there are some people that would pay some good money for some of those as a memory. What I'd like to see is that, you know, one of my thoughts is could one of our nonprofits purchase them at a surplus price, and then that nonprofit could sell them. It becomes off the city, and then that money gets donated back to the fountain or something like that. Going to Mr. Lindsay's idea of declaring them surplus and moving on. I know when this came up 3 or 4 years ago, one of the concerns was that they're dirty and nobody will buy them and it's a safety hazard getting them out. But one of my thoughts is maybe the fire department can do some hose training on the rocks and clean them off and all of a sudden the rocks are clean. And but I think we need to, you said you've identified about 500. I think that's a valid thing to have some for future use. But right now they're just sitting up there, and I would wonder if is this up where, up on north side where the other demolition stuff is? Is it in a similar area? that they're being stored. So I'd be curious to know how many of them have already left unbeknownst to us. But I would be supportive of declaring them surplus material and coming up with a plan to allow other folks to use them in an appropriate setting.
Thank you. And just to clarify, a nonprofit would have the opportunity to bid on them just like anybody else, right? It wouldn't be identified, Brian, as one individual. It could be anybody. We can't just identify as a nonprofit. Is that correct, or can we?
That's correct, Mayor. The best practice is to make sure that it's a sale that's equal to everyone and that everybody has an opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Paulson, any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Councillor Beyondich. Okay, recommendation from Britt. Do you have any personal comments or recommendations moving forward, or leave that up to the council to make that determination?
Really up to the council, I'm just all about the compliance.
Very good about the
As long
compliance
as we do
issue.
it correctly, I'm okay with it.
Thank you. And your recommendation, Brian, is to what? You have one?
I was seeking the council's guidance. Like I said, I've had several people approach me, and I told them I would seek the council's guidance on this to see if the council was in favor of declaring some of them surplus so that they could be put up for sale for the public to acquire.
Okay, so we could make a motion to do that, and then we can determine later on, based upon staff's recommendations, as how many you feel that, you want to put out there.
And if we wanted to start with saying 500 stones, that would leave us over 1,000. And as we go along, we could determine if we have a need for less of them and do the same process again.
So the motion today would be to make the request as indicated by our city attorney, and then we can determine how many later on and what the cost would be to each one of those. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would make a motion to authorize staff to come up with a plan to determine what is surplus, and then the plan to dispose of, or whatever the proper term is, of those surplus stones and bring it back to the council for formal approval.
Okay, thank you. Did you get that motion by Councillor Johnson, Pam?
One more time.
Certainly. I would make a motion to direct staff to determine what portion of the stones are surplus and a plan for getting rid of them and bring it back to the council for formal approval and action.
Is there support?
I'll support with a comment, Mayor.
Support by Councillor Johnson. For further comment, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Bearable, excuse me.
That's okay, it's not Barnzelli this time anyway.
No, I guess you run the gambit.
What I would like to see in this, Brian, is put increments there, say 10 blocks, 50 blocks, 100 blocks, so people can put separate, because they're not all going to want to bid for 500 of them, but you're going to have to actually, in surplus still, you got to put it out for bid. So put blocks in there of different amounts, and staff can determine that. Okay, that's the only comment I have.
Yeah, and we part of the plan that's been in the formal motion. Thank you. Councillor Barnzelli.
Thank you. Brian, how heavy are these?
Very heavy.
So-
Each block is between 50 and 75 pounds.
So we're not going to load them or unload them for them. They're going to come there, purchase it, and leave, right?
Yes.
We don't want to be touching.
I would say that we would be selling the blocks as is, and they would have to coordinate with us for pickup.
Yeah, and for delivery, they have to take it.
Yeah, we would not be delivering.
No, thank you.
Yeah, and I like the plan. As a elected official and as a private citizen, I think it's a great opportunity for others. I would certainly be interested for some landscape materials as a historic piece. So I think it's a good plan moving forward. It's a good motion moving forward. So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
We'll go back up to item number 7.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Item number 7, Police Department requests. The first one is for office space outside of City Hall for the Community Relations Officer. In your packet, you have a memo from Community Resource Officer Lieutenant Swenson. He is at training today, so he couldn't be here. But in his memo, he discusses the request to have an office located at Thunderbird Mall. The mall is willing to donate the rent for free for a year, and we would have to pay the utilities.
Okay, Chief? We have Assistant Chief Chad Nicola in the audience. Chief, if you just come forward and you don't need to announce your name, Chief, Assistant Chief Chad Nicola from the Police Department, with respect to this request for office space outside City Hall. It's a really good partnership between the Rock Step Group, the Thunderbird Mall, and the City of Virginia. So thank you, Chief.
Absolutely. Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Appreciate the time this morning. So yeah, we, with this, we have the Community Resource Officer position, which Lieutenant Swenson hit the ground running a little over a month ago now, almost going on 2 months here. And some of the things that we thought were going to be his duties have kind of been held up by COVID, but now we find out the school year is going to begin, so his SRO part of his job will begin pretty soon too. But we also have the opioid coordinator position that hopefully we'll be filling, hopefully early fall sometime. So what we had discussed was having a location off-site. We know that when it comes to opioid abuse, drug abuse in general, people are less likely to come to the police department to discuss those kinds of issues and reach out. We just know that there's a stigma involved there. So what they have found is when you have these types of positions set up, if you have a location off-site from the police department, you get better participation from family members possibly coming in to seek help or from the people themselves that are abusing the drugs. So we found that this might be a good way to do that, and we're very fortunate that the mall's been willing to offer up this space for now. There'll have to be some accommodations made in which it sounds like Public Works is willing to work with the folks at the mall to make some of those things happen. But again, I think an all-around good opportunity for us.
Okay, thank you, Chief. I just have 2 questions before we go to the rest of the council. First of all, does the SRO or the Community Service Officer have flexible hours in some respects? So if the mall hours are from 10 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, does that community officer have the opportunity to get in there before and after hours, number one? And number two, and if he wants to see people or meet with a community member or family or whatever, that you'll be able to do that off hours where you have opportunity to have access to that building?
Absolutely. Yep. That was one of the big things he wanted from the mall. They were able to accommodate him in that way. Absolutely.
Yeah, my understanding from the Rock Step Group, they're very excited about providing that opportunity for us, so thank you. Councilor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. One of my questions that I had is, would other officers have access to this space? So let's say there was a domestic and that children needed to be removed. Would they be able to bring the child there and wait for social services there as opposed to the sterile stuff at City Hall, or is that something we can figure out? I just see this opportunity at the mall to be more of a friendly space for when there is other incidents.
Not that the police department isn't friendly.
Well, but it's sterile. It is sterile.
Right. And we do have our one interview room. That's our soft interview room for those types of scenarios. For now, that's not going to be the case, but maybe down the road, certainly it's something it could grow into, by all means. And it would be a good opportunity for something like that, absolutely.
And I think I really like the idea of having the off-site and I like that it's over at the mall, because a lot of students who go to the school over there, it will be a better opportunity for them to see that the police are present and be able to have those relationships. So I think both of these, are we doing the lockbox first, or are we doing this rental first?
The space first.
The space first? Okay, I will make a motion that we authorize staff to work with and sign agreements for the space at the mall and appropriate physical adjustments as needed.
Okay, motion by Councilor Johnson to authorize the city to move into an agreement with the Rock Step Group to provide office space for our community service officer and for other activities that the police may encounter based upon the need identified by the police department. Is there support?
All support.
support by Counselor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Paulson, do you have anything? Okay, we'll go. Pam, did you get that motion? Okay, thank you. Okay, Counselor Paulson?
Would that be an issue at all?
That would have fallen under our city policy, would it not, Britt?
If any incident occurred, we would be covered and
Thank you. Counselor Beyondich?
so I missed most of that discussion. What the motion is.
Well, the motion is by Counselor Johnson and supported by Counselor Baraboo to authorize the City of Virginia and the Police Department to enter into agreement with the Rockstep Group to provide office space in the mall rent-free for a period of 1 year for an office for the community relations officer that we approved previously. Okay, thank you. Further discussion, Counselor Freelieb, and then on to Counselor Bearable. Counselor Freelieb.
And so the only cost we would incur for this is the cost of utilities for that office space. And that's not cost prohibitive to the city in any way, and it's budgeted accordingly.
We didn't budget for it, but we don't anticipate that the utilities are that much. It's a small office space. We're not talking Dunhams or size or anything. It's pretty small.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Counselor Freelieb. Counselor Bearable.
Yeah, and Brian Lindsay, you will look over the agreement just to make sure everything's kosher, correct?
Will.
Okay. And I see there is one cost to just set up of some equipment. We might have some excess equipment around too, so, yeah, we do. Okay, so I'm not worried about that.
It's been identified and procured, huh?
Way it works.
Post-it notes on it already, that where it's going.
I saw the post-it notes on it. So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Now the next item.
Yes, next item is to authorize the purchase of a biometric safe for the SRO office.
Just so everybody's clear, this would be at the school, not out at the mall location.
So would you explain to the general public what a biometric safe is?
Yeah, you bet. So these are those really cool safes that literally it'll be programmed to be myself, Chief Mattson, and then Lieutenant Swenson, be the only people that be able to access it. Usually it's either your thumbprint, whatnot, and your finger. Yep, great. You see them at night. A lot of people have them in their homes. Awesome for when things go bad and in a hurry. But again, very safe safes. Very difficult for anybody else to get into. They do have the backup combinations and this and that. But you know, what we have found is there's kind of a fine line you walk when it comes to the school and having an officer there. And it's one thing to walk around with a gun on your hip, but schools obviously get very nervous about having any other kind of firearms within the school in any capacity, and that's very understandable. So one of the solutions that Nationwide and Lieutenant Swenson went to the academy a few weeks ago, which it was for the school resource officer's position, and that's what they talked about, was putting one of these safes in so that way you can secure one of the weapons in there. Now again, the question always comes up, well, why does an officer need something beyond the firearm that's on his hip? Well, as a firearms instructor for the police department, what I train our officers is this is your backup gun.
Active shooter?
Now, active shooter situations, active deadly threat, doesn't even have to be a shooter necessarily.
Active threat, yes.
Yep, we've seen in plenty of school incidents where somebody comes in with a knife or machete or, you know, unfortunately other types of things, and just as many people are injured, maimed, you name it. So God forbid one of those bad days of days comes, but again, we put hundreds of thousands of dollars into schools every year to make sure that they're safe from fires. We haven't lost a child in a school fire in over 100 years in the United States. But yet every single year we have kids that die in school due to violence. So again, we want to make sure that our officer on the scene has the tools that they need. Again, I'm a pretty darn good shot. For those of you who don't know, I was a sniper in the Marine Corps. I'm pretty good. But if all of a sudden I'm shooting down a long school hallway with a handgun, it's not very effective. That's where you need a long rifle. So that's where this safe would also come into play, is being able to safely store a firearm inside his office. The other big thing, too, that we want to stress, as the SRO, you are investigating things that go on at the school. So that means
Evidence.
collection evidence. Exactly, Mayor. So what are we going to do with this evidence? If you're just putting it in a school office, which unfortunately, because it is a school office, several people have master keys. So now you have evidence that possibly could be called into play by an attorney saying, wait a minute, who else had access to this? Who else touched this? Who else maybe took it? What if something goes missing? So this safe would be awesome to be able to lock things away, knowing that there's only a certain amount of people that have access, and all those questions go away.
So before we go to the rest of the council, the question that I have for you is, well, two questions. One, is the safe heavy enough so it can't just be hauled away easily?
Yeah, and this one bolts from the inside right to the wall, so that way it can't just be jacked away, and it is nice and heavy duty and make it real difficult.
Nothing's impenetrable, but it's to the point where, you know, it's safe enough where you can.
Yep.
So the question is, well, that would be up to the discretion of the department and the staff, depending upon if it's hazardous weapons, how long they we be stored in there, if it's temporary for a long period of time. So this is determination by your policy, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Here, I'm just going to make a motion to authorize spending up to $1,500 to get the best and right size safe for the SRO office at the Rockridge High School in Virginia.
Thank you. Motion by Councilor Johnson to authorize the purchase of the biometric safe for the SRO office located at the school. Is there support?
I'll support Mayor for, oh, okay, go ahead, Let.
Okay, support by Councilor Paulson. Further discussion? Councilor Baraboo first.
Just one thing, Chief Nicola. Those biometric safes have some quirks to them, because I have one at home, and they have some quirks. If your fingers are real dry, fingerprints don't work, so you gotta lick your fingers sometimes to get them to work.
Sometimes you do, absolutely.
So there are quirks. I happen to have one with a keyed thing
Yep.
instead of a combination, which I think if there's more than one person, there's a couple different ways you can do a key
Absolutely.
or a combination. Just look at that very carefully.
Yep, absolutely. There's even ones now that have the swipe cards and
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
that too.
yeah, there's all
Absolutely.
kinds of them out
Good
there.
options.
But I'll tell you what, they're a godsend. For protection, I agree with you, dual things.
Absolutely.
So just one more question before we vote. We have an SRO agreement with the school for how long? So 3-year agreement, so that'll cover the 3-year agreement. In the event that the new school is being built moving forward down the road, an additional agreement will have to be proffered and negotiated with the school, and that would be that biometric safe has the ability to be removed.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Paulson, any further discussion on the motion? Okay, Counselor Beyondich? Okay, thank you. Pam, did you get that motion? Okay, thank you. Moved and supported. For no further discussion, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Anything else, Brett?
Item number 9 under Buildings and Grounds, review the quotes for the Midway Hotel asbestos. This is coming back from July 21st, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting. And I do have a typo. It should be $28,300 under ACCT Inc. I forgot a zero there.
And that money would come from where?
ORB grant in the amount of $17,725.
And that's specifically for that demo?
Yep, it came out of the Commissioners Fund at the end of the year, end of their fiscal year last year.
Yes, the conversation with Mark Phillips indicated that he would be providing that. Thank you for getting that from him. Okay, comments, questions for Councilor Freely first, and then over to Councilor Johnson. Councilor Freely.
So it's a $28,000 bid currently. We've $20,500, and we've incurred a cost of $11,000-ish for the. And has that been paid yet? Yes. Okay, so that's covered, and so we're about short $3,000-ish to be able to get this accomplished. And there's ways we can find that $3,000, I'm assuming, to make up the difference in whatever fund. Then I would make a motion to move forward with the quotes for the Midway Motel asbestos removal.
I'll support, Mayor.
Okay, moved by Counselor Freely and supported by Counselor Bearable to, your wording of one of the quotes, the low bid, is that
Yeah,
correct?
Abate Tech Environmental Services in the amount of $20,050.
Okay, for $20,050. It's been moved and supported. Further discussion, Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. When I was reading it, there was some stuff about the shingles and some stuff that wasn't included in the bid. How might that affect the total cost at the end? If we,
Going to enter into agreement with Abate Tech for the removal of the 1450 square feet of asbestos floor tile, the pipe insulation, the texture ceiling, that anything else would just go with the demo of the building, would just come.
and that's within MPCA? Okay, all right, thank you.
What
Thank
happened
you.
was a demo, if they think it's suspect, the contractor would take it, put it in a different pile, and so there would just be a different demo tipping fee than the other one, if they think that there's something funny going on.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. Counselor Paulson, any further comments? Okay, Counselor Beyondich? Okay, thank you. Counselor Freely.
So this is preparatory to the demolition of the actual hotel. And then, so like, I know there's costs to be incurred for that, but do we have city crews possibly that would be able to do that with the equipment necessary to do that, to save on the costs of that, or are we gonna have to bid out for that?
Potentially, if we have time, which we do, we don't have anybody knocking down the door tomorrow to go to this spot. So if the crews have the ability to schedule it as part of their overall duties, it's a potential.
Before snow flies or no?
Oh, no, it would be winter work.
Winter work, okay. All right, thank you.
And I think in previous conversations, to add on to what Counselor Freely's question was, is that, Ed Alto indicated, and I think in discussion with other staff, that the city crew does have the ability to do it. It's just going to be a time intensive project to tear it down and to remove everything, so. Counselor Freely.
My concern with winter work would be that normally you hose down buildings like that for dust. And I'm not sure that we'd be able to do that at that time of year.
Winter is actually when we do most of our demolitions,
Oh.
because it doesn't seem to fly as much.
All right.
It is common.
Well, bottom line is we need to get that thing down and out of there so we can move forward with what other plans can.
Thank you. It's moved and supported. Further discussion. Pam? Yes, Bill is here. Okay, well, I guess we should hear that comment. That's not what's on the notice here, and that's the narrow focus of what we're acting on right now. It's just the asbestos. But Bill Hennis, our in the engineering department at this point in time. Bill?
Now, we provided you with two quotes for up at the Midway. One of the ACCT includes the removal of all the asbestos and hazardous material up in that building. If you look at the other quote, it doesn't include removal of the tar paper that's up as part of the roofing system. That has to come out, it's asbestos containing. Again, theirs is, I don't want to say an incomplete bid, it just does not include, the low bid does not include removing all the material.
Okay, thank you. So by moving all the materials, it's an additional $20,000 above and beyond.
And it has to come out before the building's demo. The low bid was only taking, I don't want to say the easy stuff. They didn't want to take you have to dismantle the whole roof to take that tar paper out, and they didn't include it because they don't do roofing on their bid.
So based upon what information we received from Britt and once we take down if we give it to the bid that we have the motion on the floor right now, and then anything else can be removed and demoed and by whoever our demo team is going to be, whether it's a city or someone else. Is that correct?
What you're sitting with is only a partial clean building. So when you go to the demolition stage, you will have to bid these other items. City cannot remove asbestos. So we'd have to hire a contractor basically to take that roof off before we demo it.
So the bid
And that's the reason why I recommend if you want to take the building down, you have ACCT come and take all the material out. Then if you want the city's crews to demo it at a future day, we could do it because that material's out of there. If you do not go that route and go with a low bid, the city would have to bid it again to have somebody come and actually remove that material.
Thank you very much, Bill. Question?
However, at that time, there's another grant cycle that could be used for that. This is commissioner funding that was given to us at the end of fiscal year 2020 that they want us to use. So there are different components. And also, once the roof is taken off, if we don't get to that building demolition right away, we're gonna have a horrible soggy mess sitting there for months and months and months until somebody gets there to demolish it.
Yeah, so looking from a procedural perspective,
Correct.
based on a recommendation from Bill, that we got to get that down. So based
So
on
the
the,
council wants to proceed.
right, so, but we have money from the IEEE, it has to be spent. This is, this is money that's got to be spent immediately, otherwise it's going somewhere else. So the question is, do we spend it now and give the low bid, or do we spend it now and try to find the other 20-some thousand dollars for the rest of the thing moving forward? So I would have to ask Sherry, based on the recommendation from Bill Hennis about that, we'd have to come up with actually $23,000 more.
I just had this idea.
Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
But we did sell the hospital for roughly $90,000. That goes into our economic development. So do you want to take some of that 20,000 out of there? Oh, I'm sorry. As long as it doesn't scream at me. Does the council want to take some of that? I mean, that's in the economic development right now, sitting there.
So the question that I have for you about that, I have no problem doing that, but from my perspective, but I have one question with respect to the money. Now, it's not law, and I would maybe refer to Brian, whether he probably would have to research this, but it's my understanding that the money that was being spent when we sell the hospital, there was a ruling, whether it was from a judge or whether it was from some other entity, that it had to be spent on health care. Now, there's no case law about that, but that was some kind of a ruling of some sort. I guess I don't know if we can spend the money for that, or if that ruling stands, or if it would be an impediment for us to utilize those funds.
It was an attorney general opinion.
Attorney General's opinion.
When a municipal hospital is sold, the funds that are received to the municipality have to be reused for healthcare.
Okay, that was an Attorney General's opinion.
Correct.
It's not case law, but that was the recommendation by the Attorney General's office. So we'd have to take a look at that, but we can do that. We can do that research, right, to get that taken care of, take a look at it. So there is money in the event that we're authorized to do that. We could technically take it out of there. Okay, thank you. Councilor Freely.
So like the last time we talked about this, I don't recall the $17,000 being availed to us. So that's something that's new, and it's kind of a use it or lose it before the end of this fiscal year.
The
And
very last few monies that the commissioner had left in his personal fund.
but ideally and preferably, Bill, you're saying it would be best to get it all out of there at one time. But right now, we really don't have the necessary resources to do that, it appears. And I mean, we do, but not for what we originally intended to utilize that money for. So the potential is to get out the interior asbestos and remove that, have the building standing structurally with integrity throughout the winter, maybe hit another round of potential grant monies available through IRRR to do the actual exterior removal and demolition. So I guess I would stand by my current motion to utilize the money we have available for the at least partial demolition or removal of asbestos internally, and then revisit this upon the next round of potential monies available to move forward with the continuation of the project. That's what I would say.
Thank you.
As opposed to withdrawing my
No,
request upon Bill's recommendation. I mean, I understand the recommendation, but I really don't want to use that money in that fashion at this point in time. I'd rather use what we have before lose what we have.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate Bill's recommendation moving forward. He's looking at the long term. We're looking at the short-term funding source that comes available. I stand by and would support your motion. Counselor Bearable?
Yeah, Britt, I'm assuming that we didn't get the commercial demolition money for this year for that
Nope.
motel. We can reapply next year for that though, correct? Because that comes under the, so that'd be so many dollars per square foot if we are successful next year for the tear down too. And I'm assuming you're planning to do that anyway.
Correct.
So, you know, I hate to take that money from someplace else right now until we find out if we get that. If we don't, we're still on the same cost basis in the end, I think. Maybe a little bit more expensive to split this, but I think I supported that if I remember right, and I think I'm going to stick with my support on this.
Very good.
Bill, you've done a good job, but we got to take the money, and if we can't spend it, which I'm not sure that hospital money we can, because that is part of the hospital whole properties, the way we sold that. So with that, and I remember that attorneys general, because that deal on this, I was around when that first came up on the council, and that was an issue because you can't spend it for healthcare in the community, like anything for our employees or anything. It has to be for national physical facility or something, the way the ruling, I believe, came down. So I'm not going to remove my second either.
Okay. Oh, it's been moved and supported, and I want to say that in that discussion with the commissioner, recognizes the fact that we did apply twice for this demolition grant and didn't get it, which, you know, he feels it's unfortunate, and that's the way they determined IEEE with the funding sources. He recognizes the fact this is an economic development opportunity and potential blight and eyesore for the city. It can provide access for the new business development. All those discussions took place, and he said that the best that they can do, and he was able to allocate that money directly out of his fund for that. So I think we should move forward with that based upon the motion by Councilor Freely, and the second by Councilor Bearable. Let's go to the phones. Councilor Paulson, any questions or concerns about that? Thank you. Councilor Beyondich? Okay, thank you. Councilor Freely.
Just quickly, so Bill, I just want you to assure me though that with the interior removal of whatever they're taking out of there, that's not going to compromise the structural integrity of that over the course of the winter, would it?
It's just purely furnishings there, floor tile, those kind of.
And asbestos wrapped pipes and so on?
There's some of that, but mostly it's floor tile, mastic.
Okay. And my thought is that we're going to be more apt to acquire further grant funding on a lesser amount necessary when we only have now that part left to do. So I'd move forward with this.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
I've got two questions. I don't remember seeing the $40,000 number in our packet. When did that information come through other than noted by Pam? I guess I would request that in the future, that kind of vital information be put in so that that can be part of the thought process going in here instead of it coming up as we're ready to vote. So I'm a little frustrated that that information about the total big picture wasn't included as the information under number 9 for the packet. My other question would be, if we were to spend hospital money up there, what are the consequences? So it's not like someone's going to come in and fine us $4 million for misappropriation of funds or something like that. It would be up to somebody to come in and say, shame on you, don't do it again. So, we're worried about spending that money, and if there are no consequences other than the Attorney General going, I don't think you should do that again. So I just want to put that out there. I'm in support of taking the first step and asking for the IRRB for additional money in the future. I think as long as we're starting to make progress on this building, whether it comes down this winter or next spring. I haven't seen any movement by the developers up there in the last week since we've given them the 66-foot easement, so I don't think this is a high priority right now. Thank you.
Okay. As long as we're following the law, that's all I care about. So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Next item on the agenda is a review the proposed map for Revive Virginia Food Truck Festival on September 12th, 2020. And on your map is the yellow circles with red outlines are where we're potentially looking at placing food trucks.
So my question to you, Britt, is this limited to food trucks only? Because I've had some telephone calls about if you're going to have that, can I sell balloons and things for the little kids? Can I sell, that kind of thing?
They have a transient merchant license they can sell on.
Thank you very much. Okay. Counselor Johnson?
I will move approval of the proposed location of food trucks, understanding that there may be more added as we get closer. I know I've had at least one inquiry about who to call about it. And part of that motion is to make sure we're working with city staff to ensure proper placement for safety.
I'll support.
Moved by Counselor Johnson, supported by Counselor Freely to approve the map for the Food Truck Festival that's scheduled from Revive Virginia for September 12th, 2020. This would also include, for clarification, if there's a restaurant downtown, they already have their health, could they put something on the street, right, too?
Yes.
All right, very good, thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 11 is we have received an offer to purchase city-owned property at 402 North 3rd Avenue. If you'll recall, this was the Widener apartment building that the city tore down, and we received those 3 lots in the corner of 3rd Street North and 3rd Avenue. The SEPAs are looking to place a residential family home there. This would be right across from Caulfield's.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Freely?
I'd just like to know if that has been appraised, and is there an appraised price or an estimated market value for the combined 3 lots that they're seeking to purchase? I would suggest that we move forward with appraisal of that property to get a starting point for, I appreciate the offer, but I think that potentially could be worth more than the offer that's been provided.
And is that your motion?
To seek to have that property appraised for an estimated market value so that we can determine whether or not it's something that's saleable for the city and/or we'd prefer to use for city purposes.
Okay. Pam, did you get that motion by Counselor Freely? Pam? Please repeat the motion. Thank you.
I would move that we seek to have those lots appraised to determine a price point for accepting bids on those properties.
A move by Counselor Freely. Is there support?
And that would be if, in fact, the city plans on selling those properties as opposed to utilizing them for city purposes.
Very good. The appraisal would be a starting point for whatever our use is going to be.
Correct.
Thank you. And it's been moved by Counselor Freely. Is there support? Is there support?
Support for discussion.
Support by Counselor Beyondis for further discussion. Further discussion, anyone? Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. As we were going through the process of getting that apartment building torn down, I believe this is exactly what we wanted to have happen there, is that somebody would purchase the 3 lots and establish residence there, tax base. The Caulfield's home is beautiful. I can only imagine that the SEPAs would do the same thing on the other side of that lot. And I'm fine with getting an appraisal, but I think when we did do this, the whole idea was to get a single-family dwelling there that would be a nice tax base. So I would like to see this kind of expedited, because if there's folks interested, and I'm guessing there hasn't been any other interest in the past, and we move forward with it that way. So I will be supporting this so we can get moving on it.
To clarify, we've had people inquire, nobody's officially made an offer. This is the first offer we've received.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I just want, add a little bit more information from my perspective, we had lot prices set up in Fairview, Northern Heights, and these other things, and those prices varied over time, changed. Pretty soon, we sold the property, sold them for $1. Even though you have an appraisal, which we're asking for today, and I agree that we need to expedite this as quickly as we can, I think that the offer, not that you're trying to give a property away, but an offer to build a single-family resident home, just, for what you're going to spend for the offer over time, your taxes, and you're going to have a tax base there. So, I don't even have a problem with the offer, but I think it's prudent for us to move forward to get an appraisal as a price point to see if that offer is within reason, but to expedite it as quickly as possible. So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, I disagree that we need an appraisal on that. It's, if I'm reading this descriptions right, it's 75 feet going north to south, correct, on this? And the width is going from the alley there by Billy's Lake up to Third Avenue, the depth part of it. I think $10,000 is a reasonable price. Do we know when they want to start building on this property yet? I didn't see anything, unless I missed it.
No, we did warn them that we would probably follow the Fairview covenants, where you had to have a permit within 12 months and start building within 18.
Okay.
Just because that's our normal standard for our housing lots, is that you have to at least get your stuff going within a year.
And they understand that. They do. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, so it's 100 feet, I'm sorry, it was 225, I see the map, I forgot to look at that. I think it's reasonable. I'd like to see it go and get it on the tax rolls, because the longer you wait, if it goes past this year for them to purchase it, it ends up not being on a tax roll until 2022, because if it goes into 21, you got a year's delay again to get on the tax rolls. So you lost a year's worth of taxes, because who knows how long that appraisal. We just did one on our Savior's Lutheran Church for commercial, and that took a long time to get that done. And those appraisers are way out there for time right now because of the COVID. So I can't support this to not sell it right now.
Yeah, I think we should sell it, but I agree that let's find out what the value is. I know historically what we've done in the past. I think it's a reasonable offer, but let's take a look and see. But I think it's important under this motion is so we try to expedite this as quickly as we can to get it done. I think as a residential property appraisals as opposed to commercial properties, I would assume, based upon my discussion with the appraiser the other day, who was coming to my house to do an appraisal, he said he could do it within a week. So let's see if we get that done. It's already on the table. It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Freely. Okay, hang on a sec. Councilor Freely first. Councilor Freely.
Well, just for the sake of discussion and not for any argumentative point, it's like, for example, the city had the opportunity to purchase property for an estimated market value of $37,000 up in Midway, but we were more than happy to pay $90,000 for it with potential developmental plans for that. We were more than willing to pay more than the market value on the hotel in Midway. So I think we've stumbled a little bit in terms of and we also, as far as I remember, we had about a $900,000 property that we procured to the city to the school district for $50,000. So, and all that is well and fine, with regard to whatever we intend to utilize those properties for in the future. But in this instance, and I agree, we should get people to build a single-family home there, but I don't think it's going to be that long a period of time for us to get that appraisal up accomplished. Whenever we're in a negotiations process on real estate, when an offer is made, a counter is usually provided, you know? And that counter may be, yeah, 10,000 sounds good. So I guess it's just, I think, prudent on the city's part, given the other issues that we had with real estate and our purchasing of thereby, to go ahead with an appraisal as expeditiously as possible and then move forward with the potential for the sale of that property to this family. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Friedman. Councillor Paulson?
Residential and not for a rental?
Correct. Okay, thank you. It's been moved and supported to direct city staff to obtain an appraisal and as expeditiously as possible. Hard word for me to say. Expeditiously as possible, and to come back to the city council with a price point for negotiations. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please, Pam.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes?
No.
Aye. Motion passes 6-1. Thank you.
Yep. The next item on the agenda is the proposal for Phase 2 environmental site work at 901 9th Street North, and we have Attorney Brian Lindsay here on this matter.
Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. As you can see in the packet, and as we know, pursuant to our discussions with Essentia about the purchase or acquisition of the hospital property, there was some discovery of some items that caused a little bit of concern during the Phase 1. The Essentia has moved forward and obtained a Phase 2 with some cost estimates. My understanding is that they're willing to pick up the cost to proceed on those, and what they're really looking for is two things. Number one, that the city's in agreement with proceeding forward to address the issues that are identified by the Phase 2, or to undertake the plan that's put forward here. And number two, to make sure that we're willing to adjust the closing date on our purchase agreement should extra time, and it's expected that extra time would be needed here.
And your recommendation is?
Based on what I've seen so far, and based on the fact that through my conversations with Mr. Modich, it looks like the folks at Essentia are willing to pick up the tab to move forward on this. I would recommend that we allow this to move forward, and that we agree to extend timelines on the purchase agreement if that's required, which we expect it is.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Questions, comments, and action by the council? Councilor Johnson?
So to be clear, the city still owns the hospital and the property.
That's correct, and maybe just a little bit more information. It looks like what was discovered up there is very minimal, and it doesn't look like it's going to take a whole lot to get it taken care of. And again, for the city's purposes, it seems the price is going to be right to get this addressed. One way or another, these issues will have to be addressed. And I, from my standpoint at least, and this is obviously a council decision, but from my standpoint, now with the folks at Essentia picking up the tab, maybe as good a time as any.
Thank you.
I would move forward with the authorization for them to do their Phase 2 work.
Moved by Councilor Johnson to allow Essentia to move forward with the proposal for Phase 2 environmental site at 901 9th Street North. Is there support? Support by Councilor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Baraboo.
Yeah, once we accept this Phase 2, if they find an extension of these areas, if they're pretty confident that they've got the area surrounded already, because I've been around a long time for these environmental things, and it would be our responsibility, I believe, since we still want it to clean it up before we actually give it to them, unless there's an agreement that they agree to clean it. Correct, Brian?
Mr. Lindsay?
Correct. As the fee owner of the property, the ultimate responsibility would fall to us. There's a couple of things that kind of weigh in our favor here. Number one, the folks at Essentia, up to this point, through my negotiations or through my conversations, have been pretty good to deal with on this point. And number two, as far as things that you can find in the ground, what we found was probably the best thing you can find because it was petro-related. So we have the petro fund that could back us up on this.
That was the next question I was going to ask, if it's petrol-related. So I don't have a problem doing it this way now, since it looks like you didn't really get a good answer from the letter that Ron sent, but they must have more analysis that we haven't seen. So I have no problem now.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
The next item on the agenda is number 13 under personnel, discuss the vacancy of the lead engineer position in engineering department.
Could we move that to last?
Sure can.
Let's, if we could, please, if with the council's permission, could we move to the other items? I think this might take a little bit more discussion. Thank you. Let's move to item 15, please.
Number 15, approve the resolution to hire Dory Shackman as the parking meter monitor.
I'll move the resolution to hire Dory Shackman.
Moved by Councilor Johnson, supported by Councilor Beyondich, to approve the resolution to hire Dory Shackman as a new parking monitor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We just take the word meter out of there?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. Okay.
since there's no more parking meters.
Yeah, okay.
Item number 16 is adopt a resolution or review the resolution urging state legislatures to pass a bonding bill in the special session to be held in September 2020.
Yes. And this came in a request as our local legislators and our lobbyists moving forward to that we should, send a resolution urging them to pass the bonding bill. They didn't pass it in August because they are not allowed to under the Constitution by selling selling bonds in August. It prevents them from holding a bonding bill hearings in August, so they're going to do this in September. Likely going to be calling a legislative session tentatively around September the 12th. So by sending a resolution urging the legislature to pass this bonding bill would be very helpful.
I would move to encourage the legislature to pass the bonding bill in resolution form.
I'll support the resolution, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely needed.
Okay, moved by Councilor Freely, supported by Councilor Baraboo, to approve a resolution requesting the state legislature pass a bonding bill. Is there further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 17, the review the proposed ordinance changes to City Code 2.31 Joint Airport Commission.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I ask a question before we get started on this? Because otherwise we're going to be here for a discussion forever on this.
Sure. Councilor Baraboo.
Twice now I've asked for research to be done since we're a charter city, home rule charter city, and not a statutory city. If these rules actually apply, because there is some statutes out there, and I haven't gotten an answer yet on this. And I cannot support this at this point in time with the way the changes are written until we find that answer out.
I do have the answer, Charlie. This is actually in our ordinance, not in our charter, and because
Okay.
it's not in our charter, it does stand.
Does stand, okay, unless we amend the ordinance.
Unless we amend the charter and take it out of the
Okay.
ordinance.
All right, I still have an issue with this because we're not gonna, I've been through this many times with appointees to this airport commission, and it's tough to find people. And I think you need to change one part of this. You gotta have members of both councils to be at the meetings for a quorum and not just one or the other, which it looks like from what I read, it could be either or. So that would be the change I'd recommend in there, that you have to have members from your two councils. If you're going to appoint two members from each council, you need to have at least one of the two from each city there to make up a quorum. I don't see that in there.
You wanted to say, you would like that section that says quorum, instead of saying two members of either council, it says one member of each council must be there for quorum.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Freely.
Can you just summarily tell us what those ordinance changes are briefly? I mean, it's essentially that the authority was made up of non-residents, correct? And that was a concern? And that's the impetus for revising this?
And part of the change, the biggest change is that Evelyn wants to put their city council members as their board members, and they need to change the ordinance to allow that.
Changing their ordinance.
Yes, and for them to change the ordinance, we have to agree. Whether we just agree that Evelyn gets to put counselors on, or we agree we're gonna put counselors on also, however that happens.
Right.
Our ordinances have to match.
Thank you.
Can I ask something?
Yes, oh, hang on one moment. Are you, is that to answer your question, Councillor Freely? Okay, yes, Councillor Paulson.
Okay, thank you. So the way that I'm reading this and understanding this document, is this an actual, it just says it's a draft, July 24, 2020 draft. What is this specifically? Is it an amendment to our existing ordinance?
It would be a change of our existing ordinance.
Because the original one from the 50s, let me go back to it.
Yep.
Which is our city ordinance 2.31, it states under item, it was amended on 7/15/1991, and under item B, in terms of office, it states, and this, I think this is the Joint Airport Commission, it states that no counselors should be appointed.
Right, and that's
So
the.
that's within the Joint Airport Commission.
That's the biggest change, is Evelyn wants to appoint city councilors onto their side of the commission. And they wrote it so that we could do the same also if we so choose.
But that's in the original Joint Airport Commission agreement.
Correct.
Between both cities, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and what is the, I guess, what is the advantage or disadvantage? And maybe our city attorney can weigh in on that. If there was specific language in there originally, how would this affect a change, whether it be negative or positive?
Brian, do you have any preliminary comments?
Just as a preliminary matter, whether this is a negative or positive change, I guess depends on the point of view. From a city standpoint, I mean, what I see when I read through and kind of my understanding of the whole process is, what it looks like may be happening is there may be kind of a movement to kind of reserve a little bit more authority, or to get a little bit more of the decision-making back with the cities, where it seems like that had kind of been centered more at the authority level. And that, obviously by putting some council members, or creating the possibility to put some council members onto the authority, it brings some more authority back to the cities. But I guess the short answer is it depends on your point of view, whether this is a positive or a negative.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Paulson?
So then if we're being asked to change an ordinance, is there a first and a second reading of that, or how does that, what's the process?
Right, and this is just a review of the changes, and we'll have to do a first reading and a second reading once it's approved.
I would kind of agree with Councilor Baraboo, and I do have a question in terms of us being a home rule charter city, that VITA was actually able to amend their own bylaws to allow for non-residents to be a part of that authority, and VITA is an actual authority, just like the Airport Commission is an authority. So I guess I'd like some clarification on that part of the law.
VITA was formed under a different statute than the Airport Authority was formed under.
Right.
There's a specific statute for VITA that allows that change, whereas airport authorities, because we were organized under MS 360.042, it states that the members have to be inhabitants.
And if there's a problem getting board members that are residences, what would the requirement be to allow for other municipalities or people that live in other municipalities to be a part of that board?
We would have to change the way it was established, which I don't know if that's available to do that when it was established in
We'd have to
1957.
request a statutory change.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's the reason why I think Evelyn also wanted to put city council members on there, was that way they don't have the difficulty of finding people to be on the board. They know the city council members are residents of the city, and they are going to be at least a quorum if they attend the meetings.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
And thank you. And I think that what we do have here is, I think the city of Virginia, we've appointed residents of the city of Virginia to sit on the airport authority. We have one.
One, the other two are not residents.
The other
of the
two,
city.
and we appointed two, there's two that aren't.
Correct.
And according to the statute, is supposed to, inhabitants, and
Have
we
to
have
be
two.
inhabitants.
And we have two rulings that says that is the case, and under the Minnesota statute, it lays a foundation to, for that purpose. And so the question for me is that we can continue to leave it the way it is. We don't have to appoint counselors, but we still have to abide by the rule or the statute that requires our appointees to be inhabitants of the city of Virginia, in other words, residents of the city of Virginia, not just having a business in the city of Virginia, but you have to reside as an inhabitant of the city of Virginia. So we have to make that change. But we do not have to approve counselors sitting in there. Others can do it if they want, but we don't have to.
We have to approve the change of the ordinance to allow Evelyn counselors on there and determine if we want to change our portion of the ordinance to allow for Virginia counselors. on there.
We could approve the authorization of Evelyn,
Yep.
but we don't necessarily have to have counselors on our side.
Correct.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, Counselor Friedlieb.
And so what we're acting upon today is that change on behalf of Evelyn.
If the council so chooses. You guys need to decide, do we want to put city council's members from Virginia on the board or not? And if we don't, what are we going to do with the two that are not inhabitants?
And I think this is the review of the proposed changes. We're not necessarily making a decision, although we could.
Evelyn is already acting on theirs, so we'll have to do this expeditiously
Evelyn-
sometime. I mean, not necessarily today, but we have to
Right.
at
Thank
least
you.
give them an indication of how we're going to proceed with their portion.
You think, Counselor Friedlieb, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
And I don't want to take up too much time either, because Brian did a good summary too, but I'll just, from my own perspective, it was like after sitting in on the meetings and listening to Mr. Celine's evaluation of the airport authority over the course of time and the review of the processes and procedures that were followed or not followed, what seemed to be was that there became a level of discomfort amongst the administration, I think primarily from Evelyn, with regard to the autonomy that the authority had achieved or begun to enjoy. And so they felt that it was time then to take back some of that authority from the airport commissioner authority and reestablish kind of some guidelines and procedures to shore all that up so that there cannot be any more questions that arise with regard to procedural whatever. So I guess I'm of the mind that from Evelyn's standpoint, that was an absolute necessity. And we're looking today to say that we agree with that, and maybe it would be in the best interest of both cities to do the same and arrange that on behalf of the city so that we have more direct oversight with regard to fiscal and/or operational decisions that are made there. Okay, so that's where we're at, in my opinion.
Thank you, Counselor Friedlieb. Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with Counselor Friedlieb that what Mr. Celine had said is basically the councils have not held the authority accountable for anything for a long time. And putting a council member from each city ensures, and I'll say I wouldn't know anything about running an airport, but I have an idea about city government and the protocols need to be followed. And if nothing else, I would be able to go, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right, let's check in with Britt or Brian or Jackie. So I think mandating or changing it to mandate at least a counselor from each city on is a very good idea, because they have that authority. Our economic developments have counselors on them. So I'm going to be very supportive of changing that wording for the immediate future. And then my understanding is that this allows us also to look at the bigger picture of the airport operations overall, and how do we do a better job of supporting the airport group, whether it's a commission or authority, because each one of those words has different connotations and different legal ramifications, and making it so that the airport can serve as many people as possible and not serving just a few people who are running it. I think, or utilizing it. I think that's what my challenge is listening to the folks from the Airport Commission come in. They're all airport people. And I really respect that, and those type of people need to be on that. But there also needs to be that person on there who knows nothing about airports but knows about government. There should be a person on there who, maybe it's a resident of Fail, and as we look forward, as a resident going, it's really annoying when airplanes are flying over my house at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know anything about airports, so I don't know if that happens. So I think this is the first step in a process of getting the airport authority to be efficient and run properly, so that we're not going to be liable in the future as a city if there's something is not correct, or if there's a mistake, inadvertent or advertent. So I will be supporting the changes that a counselor needs to be on, as recommended in the packet.
Okay, thank you. So we can move forward to bring it before the city council for the first reading to approval of the recommendations made, with the codicil that Councilor Baraboo brought forward, that in order to have the quorum, they'd have to have at least one city councilor represented at the airport meeting for the quorum to be established. You don't need both of them, but the request is to have at least one as part of the quorum. And I think that was the recommended change from Councilor Baraboo. Is that correct, Councilor Baraboo? Yes? Okay, so thank you. Thank you for that. Anything from Councilor Paulson with respect to this proposal with the recommended change by Councilor Baraboo of having at least one councilor sitting in order to have a quorum at the airport authority?
I'm actually comfortable with going forward. I just wanted some questions answered.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Councilor Beyondich?
Yes, I'm comfortable moving forward with this also. I think having one counselor, just to know what's happening from each city is a great idea to have on. Thank you.
And then we don't have to longer appoint a liaison, right? So, so very good. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments, or looking for a motion or some other from the city?
Just one comment. What I meant by a quorum is you need one member from Virginia, one member from Everett, but you still have to have 4 members there to have a quorum, okay? And that can be any combination, I don't care.
But at least one, you want at least one counselor to be there.
Right, one counselor, if there's going to be 2 appointed from each city, one has to be at the meetings from each city to make it equal. But they also still need the 4-member quorum to operate, just like normal.
Okay, so for my clarification, now you want one counselor from each city to be there, a minimum?
Yep,
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Because it's a 6-member board,
6-member board.
and 4 members is the quorum, but of the quorum, 1 must be from each side of the
Yeah.
councils.
Because it is an authority.
So you have to have at least 2 counselors there?
Correct.
One from F, one from Virginia?
Virginia,
Okay,
correct.
thank you. That clarifies it for me. Counselor Freely?
And so potentially 4 current members of the board could still maintain positions on the authority? Or is that going to be completely revamped? Or like if we're redoing this, then they'll have to be reappointed? How do they get their positions?
We'll
their
have to
appoint-
reappoint after the ordinance is passed. We'll have to figure
So
out.
some of these people that have been involved in this since time began, it sounds like, we'll still have the opportunity to be on that.
Very well could be, yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Right,
I
but
think
the-
we all agreed when Dave Celine gave the presentation that we do want the expertise there. People have the knowledge and we want to use them for their knowledge and their guidance.
But the clarification for finale here, the clarification is that we're going by the recommendation that they have to be inhabitants. So those who are not inhabitants would not be reappointed. And there was a mention of Hale Township. They're not an inhabitant of the city of Evlith. So the city of Evlith have appoint people that live within the city limits of Evlith. We have to appoint commissioners that live within the city limits of Virginia. So, okay, thank you.
I do have one more question.
Yes, go ahead. Councilor Beyondich.
Don't have any reports or what should be done properly. So how will a council member be chosen for that?
Well, it's part of the commission. It's a commission, but in this particular case, it would no longer be a commission. It would still be a commission. The commission appointments come from the mayor. And, of course, every biennium during an election year, which will be at the end of this year, the mayor will send out a notice to all the councilors saying, here is the commission openings. Do you want to keep your commission openings that you currently have? Do you want to change? Do you have an interest in this or not? And then the mayor has the authority to try to balance that in some way to give those councilors who want to serve on certain commissions that opportunity to do so and try to, make it evenly distributed so not the burden is on one council over another. So it would be an airport authority based on a voluntary basis. And the way I have handled it before is that if a counselor didn't want to serve on it, and there was no interest on it, then I would serve on it. So that, you want to make sure that the comfort level is there. Does that kind of answer your question, Councilor Beyondich?
And then four that are on that board, have to be residents or are they chosen or appointed by
The commission members under the new ordinance have to be residents of the city of Virginia, appointed they apply to be a part of the commission just like they do with any other commission within the city of Virginia. They go through the interview process by whatever the hiring process is or how we'd establish that, and then we appoint them based upon an interview of their interest in that area. And so I suppose if they do have airport experience, that would be helpful. Well, then, if they don't have enough candidates for that board, it's the same as any other commission, unfortunately, that those openings continue to exist. The problem with the airport authority, and it goes to your point, which is a good question, is that, they have to operate. They have to be able to function because they have the ability to make decisions on spending money and all those kind of things as opposed to other commissioners that do not. So that's going to be a challenge for us to be able to do that, but the law requires us to have those residents within the city of Virginia. I think we do have a couple that do have airport experience and actually have interest in those airports that have served in capacity in Virginia. I don't know what Evlith is, but so yeah, that is the challenge to try to fill those positions. And so regardless of whether or not we don't get any, if we don't get any commission or any applications, we still can't go outside the city limits to get that. Okay, you're welcome. Brian, City Attorney Lindsey Bryan, do you have a comment or a direction?
Thank you, Mayor. Not so much a direction, just a request for clarification. So as a result of this conversation, the way that I'm understanding it, and just so that I'm clear, is the directive or is the action that the council will take today essentially to direct the staff to prepare the language for introduction and first reading at the upcoming meeting?
Yes.
Assuming that it needs to be done expeditiously?
Yes, with that small amendment by Councilor Bearable. Thank you, Brian. Okay, thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Barnzelli. I'll go to Counselor Barnzelli first, then I'll come back to you, Counselor Paulson. Thank you.
Rick can do first.
No, go ahead.
When Chris Johnson started over there, she asked me, and I think Counselor Bearable went a couple of meetings early last year, didn't you? Ed Evelyn?
I went to a number of their commission meetings once
Yes.
this whole thing hit, and the stuff when they're looking at all their finances and stuff.
So, go ahead.
I don't know when Chris started, but I went there after her, for her third meeting, and I've been going since until March, when we had this thing in the air.
Right?
I was the only one that represented Virginia, other than Chris, but Evelyn never had a board member or a person there. So I'd be willing to go back on there. I was on there when Don Cipla was the, I don't know what do you call him, the head guy there for 6, 8 years ago. So,
Well, once this ordinance is changed,
Yeah.
you know, the appointments will be given, and, you know,
we'll discuss this.
we can discuss the appointment of what counselor is going to be sitting on that, but let's hold him to the fire. About a volunteer, so, okay. Counselor Paulson.
I want to point out that, you know, the board members that qualifications, I just want to thank them for their service, and that, you know, I just want to make it clear that it was not their fault or probably their intention to be on a board when the statutory requirements were not met. That was an error on each city's part. I just want to make that clear because I know some of the board members have faithfully served and have done it to the best of their ability, and I really, truly appreciate it.
Well said, Counselor Paulson, thank you. Moved and supported. The recommended changes with the amendment from Counselor Bearable to have the documents prepared for the first reading for the council in this next council meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mayor, may we take a quick break?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could we take a quick break?
Yes, let's take 5 minutes. Thank you. We're going to take 5 minutes, Counselor Paulson, Counselor Beyondich, and, okay. And Pam, too. Okay, let's get back to the regular council meeting. Just want to make sure that, reminder of everybody, if you could just put your mouth closer to the mic so Pam can hear. It is very difficult. So if just a reminder, please speak as loud and clearly into the microphone as you can. Councilor Paulson, are you still on the line?
Here, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Beyondich?
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's continue with the next item on the agenda, if we could. Britt?
Item number 18 is approve a resolution ordering repair and or raising of property at 1029 7th Avenue North. As you might have noticed, there was a fire there last week in the basement, and it is substantially damaged, so we're just doing our due diligence of notifying them that they have to they're ordering them to repair or to demolish the place.
And as part of that, do we know, was there insurance on that property?
There was insurance.
And we're withholding 25% of the insurance?
They've asked for it.
We've asked for it, yes. Okay, thank you. Questions, concerns, action from the council?
Mayor, I will move the resolution ordering the repair or removal of hazardous conditions located at 1029 7th Avenue North, Virginia.
Okay, moved by Councilor Bearable. Is there support? Support by Councilor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a specific timeline for this? Because I know that, so the repairs have to be done within 20 days, not a plan for, there's 20 days from the time this is approved officially. What I'm concerned about is what we have in so many other places that, I can't get it done in 20 days, can I have a 3-month extension? A 3-month extension, pretty soon we're 6 years out on extensions and nothing's happened.
Wouldn't go 6 years. But yes, they do have, the order says 20 days to repair. However, if you come in with a plan, I've contacted my contractor, he can't start for 4 weeks, we will give you an
There's
extension.
some
But you
flexibility.
have to show us that you are actually physically working on it. When we passed previously, last council meeting, they have the contractor lined up, ready to go, they're just waiting for them to get there. So there is some latitude we give them, but this at least gives us the ability to get this process started, because if we have to go to court, it's a much longer timeline. So this at least gets us to that point of the 20 days, then it gives the Brian the authority to go to the court afterward if we have to, and get the ball going.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Okay, thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 19 is a request that I had received from the IRRB regarding they are working with Lutheran Social Services for some upgrades, ADA compliant upgrades to their facility on 9th Avenue. They are seeking funds from IRRB, but IRRB cannot lend to them directly or give them a grant directly. They have to go through a fiscal agent. And so Lutheran Social Services is asking for us to be a fiscal agent for an IRRB grant. No funds from the city, just strictly a fiscal agent.
Okay, thank you.
Also move that resolution request to be the fiscal agent for the Lutheran Social Services Incorporated.
Councilor Bear moves forward and
support.
supported by Councilor Paulson, was it?
Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Support by Councilor Paulson. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, this is the crisis shelter next to the miners, is correct? Yeah.
There's some much needed upgrades that need to
They
happen
are
at
in
that
very
building.
desperate need of some upgrades.
Very good, thank you. Councilor Freely.
I don't know if this is directly related, but there's that yellow house on 9th Avenue across from the church too. Is that a Lutheran Social Services recent get, or is that a residential services, or does anybody know what that's being utilized for?
Is that the empty one there?
Well, it was empty, but now it seems to be completely redone and people are moving in, and I don't know if it's a single-family dwelling or if it's I mean, when houses are purchased in town, is there a process they go through if they're gonna be providing services to disabled people or, okay.
Yeah, they have to go through a zoning process, don't they, Britt, if they're going to be a 4-person or dwelling of those? I know
Yes, and they have to
ones
get a
on
state
9th Avenue,
license.
we had to do that for.
Because I thought that's what we were talking about. It's not that house, though.
No,
It's the actual existing shelter there,
yes, right behind the Gethsemane, between the miners and the Gethsemane.
right across their parking lot there. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, back to item
Back
13,
up to number
please.
13, discuss the vacancy of lead engineering position in engineering department. Technically, we are supposed to post the position internally. However, if the council chooses to terminate the position, we don't have to post it internally.
Okay, so my question is, and I'm sure this is for the council to make this determination, but I'm basing it on your recommendation. And then my thought process is that maybe looking at vacating this position immediately and then moving forward with another plan to utilize that position in some other manner. So if we were going to vacate first and then discuss the plan,
Yes.
or discuss the plan and then vacate?
We have to post within 7 days of the vacancy.
Right.
So I would suggest that we vacate first and then discuss a plan on what we're going to do with that position.
Yeah, that would be my sense as well. So that being said, before we enter into motion to vacate, does anybody have any questions, concerns, or comments? First, we'll go to Councilor Bearable and then over to Councilor Johnson. Councilor Bearable.
Britt, I just have one question. I missed the last council meeting. Unfortunately, I had to have some surgery done. Did the position get accepted by the individual in that department?
Yes, we are still working out some details, but yes.
Okay, so if we do this, it's not an issue right now. He still will continue until he takes over. Okay, all right, I have no problem then, Mayor. I agree with your surmising of this.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Paulson, any comments, concerns, questions?
I'm comfortable with vacating or terminating.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Beyondich.
No, thank you.
Okay, so we're looking for some council action here. The request by city staff, and I concur that we should vacate this position first and then move on to the next part of this topic.
Have been asked before this, what we were going to do in the interim if something was needed, and we do have Matt Reed from SCH here. Matt did reach out to me and stated that if we need to utilize SCH for any of the facilities or any of the things that this position had done in the interim until we figure out our plan, SCH is more than willing to help us out with anything we might need.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Okay, so looking for some action from the council with respect to this, unless there are some any other questions, comments, or concerns. Councilor
No,
Bearable.
I'm going to make the motion. Would you prefer terminate or vacate?
Vacate.
Vacate. I'm going to move that we vacate the position of, what's it, it's called city, yeah, it's got a lead engineer, I believe is the proper title, that position. So that's my motion.
Okay, motion by Councilor Bearable to vacate the lead engineering position from the city employment roster. Is there any, is there support for that? Support by Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion?
I guess we should put,
Councilor, okay, Councilor Bearable.
that we need to put in that motion that it be posted too, or is that a separate motion? Don't need that? Okay, thank you.
Councilor Freely.
Just some clarification with regard to, so vacating the position means we will no longer have a lead engineer, and there's going to be a new posting within 7 days for a new position?
Nope, we have to determine how we're going to fill that position.
So the vacating of this position does not give us impetus to have to create a vacancy for a new position. We're eliminating this
We're
position.
eliminating this position.
Because he's
It'll stay
transferring to
listed
a-
in the contract. It won't, because we usually keep them in the contract. We're just not filling it at this time. And so we'll have to determine what we're going to do.
And have we talked to AFSMI about that, and we've gotten acquiescence to that, or they?
It's a management right. We have the right and authority to terminate positions, or not terminate, but to not fill positions.
Okay,
It's just a council procedure to not do that.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to vacate this position. Well, the motion is on the floor to vacate. If it passes, then we'll move to the next part of this is discussion on how, if we're going to fill this position and how that process can move forward or direction moving forward to do so. So it's been moved and supported to vacate the lead engineer position. Is there any further discussion? It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Well, let's open up for discussion on, so I refer to our city administrator. You've had some thoughts and discussions with, with other staff and with our city finance personnel director. And do you have any ideas moving forward as we continue with this discussion on how we're going to proceed?
I suggest that either a task force or even just the personnel committee get together to discuss how we're going to proceed at a future meeting. This is a very large topic and something that I don't want to take lightly, and I think we need to do some serious discussion on what we do want in that position and how we want that department to change. The engineering department of the old is not the way the world is nowadays, so I think we need to talk about a whole systemic overlook of that department.
Yeah, and I think maybe your recommendation moving forward, we'll look at the council for direction here. But from my perspective, I think the personnel committee, whether it be the committee members or personnel committee of the whole, just to talk about that one topic, I think it's important that all the councils have some input there, instead of relying on our 3 members to discuss this, vet it out, and then bring it back. So a committee of the whole, I think, from my perspective, gives everybody an opportunity within the city elected officials to discuss that one specific topic. So thank you. We'll go to Councilor Johnson first, and then to Councilor Bearable, then to Councilor Freely. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to make sure we're including the current engineering staff, because they're and potentially Bill as Hennis as well, because they've been doing it for so long. And I want to make sure that, thinking about the airport, we have the experts in the room who know what they're doing, and the rest of us who think we want to know where we're going. So I think that's a good option, but I'd really like to get moving on this, because I would think that would mean the budget will change for next year if it comes to positions and assistants and all that kind of stuff. So I think that putting together whatever the group of folks is important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, it may be a completely different position, obviously, maybe not have anything to do with engineering, but getting input is important as we move forward. So any other comments? We'll go to Councilor Bearable, then to Councilor Freely, and then we'll go to the phone.
Yeah,
Councilor Bearable.
I prefer that this is such an important topic that we go with a committee of the whole, because otherwise we're doubling up our work. We're going to have to hear it all over the rest of the council. It's missing the other 4 out of a committee, so I prefer a committee of the whole for actual discussion. And I don't know, Brian, if we can close that discussion because it has to do with personnel and changes, or it has to be open. Okay, that answers my question.
Yeah, thank you. It's not a hiring process, just a determination as to how we want that a new position to look like if we choose to have one. Councilor Freely.
My concern is that we've had somebody holding down the lead engineering position for several decades right now with duties and responsibilities assigned, and now we're going to vacate that position. My concern obviously would be how we're going to redistribute, and do we have the capacity within the current and existing staff to absorb those duties and responsibilities with the assistance potentially of Matt and his firm. I'd like to be comfortable knowing that that's the case and that there's a plan in place for the distribution of those responsibilities so that nobody's being overwhelmed or overworked, or things are being missed out on that needed deadlines signing off on or whatever. That's one of my main concerns prior to the discussion of whether or not we need what other kind of position in the city.
I've had discussion with the engineering staff that's existing, and they are fully prepared to take on the duties in the interim. They don't want it to be forever. It's an interim thing. And so I don't know who mentioned that, the quicker would be better if we can give them a light at the end of the tunnel and let them know when that's going to be an end. But they are confident. They're going into the winter season where variances are much lower. We do have a few every now and then, but not like summer months.
But the potential exists for us to incur additional costs from having to pay Matt's potentially,
If we have to use them, yes.
in addition to the potential for the costs we'll incur for any new positions we deem to be necessary for the continued running of the city.
Well, the new position theoretically would be paid theoretically close to the same wage as the position that's being vacated. So there's kind of a
balance
being
being
there.
sought. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
And including even Matt's fees, kind of we're not paying a wage, we have a little bit of.
And so we're not looking at, there's a potential, I think we discussed that, and all that's part of the discussion of if there's any additional costs to the city. But, you know, for decades, there's been changes. We haven't had the lead engineering position for decades. We had a full-time city engineer before, and that position was vacated. That individual left. And so they created other positions, and then this evolved into different variations of a position within the engineering department. And with all due respect, I know that Bill has a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of training, but technically, he's not an engineer. So really, the lead engineer, and the title is a misnomer, right? So looking at, you know, and we'll be discussing all that, I think, in whatever format that the council chooses to have. Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, and Gary, just to relieve your mind about costs, even if we use Matt and SCH with the one position leaving to pick up the other one, his salary is wide open during that interim time. So that's already budgeted for this year. So I don't think Sherry has an issue with costs on this at all.
Thank you. Councilor Paulson, can you want to weigh in on this?
I look forward to it.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Councilor Beyondich. Okay, any other questions, comments, or concerns from anybody else? Councilor Barnzelli?
Thank you, Mayor. Don't we need an engineer?
We have one.
Matt Reed is our engineer of record.
We would hire him then, right?
We already have him hired on a contract for fee for service basis.
When did we took him on?
Right, not as a city employee. At a contract, yeah, he's been under contract with us, SCH, for quite a while.
Oh, okay, so when Bill Hennis leaves, then Bill Cole will be shortly after. His age, I'm going by, not.
Right, but Bill Cole is he's the code official now. So we're looking at not vacating his position, but only vacating the lead engineer position for the purposes of looking at establishing a new position, if that's possible, or find a way how we're going to utilize that engineering department moving forward.
Vacancy, yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Friedlieb?
Not to prolong, but just for the sake of discussion and maybe the potential for streamlining decision-making in the future, just kind of, for example, like today when Ed came before us looking for some guidance and direction with regard to what needed to be done, you know, I'm out of my lane then as a counselor on the city council when I'm being asked to provide that kind of information. I feel like that plan should come forth, that recommendation is brought to us to make a determination as to yay or nay. And I kind of mentioned that to Brian too. I don't know what the initiative was with the Marty Beyondich Park and so on and so forth. Obviously, a lot of homework was done with regard to that, but what I would have needed today to make a decision was, here's the materials we need, this is the manpower we need, this is how many hours it's gonna take, this is our plan, and then we yay or nay that, I guess is how I look at it. And so even in this regard, I'm gonna be looking to your recommendation with regard to what you feel is in the best interest of the city to rearrange your staff accordingly that will then benefit and enhance the services we provide to our constituents. So that's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm sitting here. I don't wanna be brought out of my lane from a city councilor decision-making perspective. I want to have those recommendations brought to me, and then I decide whether I'm in favor of that or not. And if that, it just takes some of the work off of our plate. I know that puts more on theirs, but that makes me more comfortable when I'm just yaying or naying a recommendation that comes forth, and I'm not intimately involved in the development of that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. And when hopefully we're going to be establishing a personnel capability meeting as soon as we can, but we want to make sure we have information from Britt, who's been doing the preliminary research with respect to this, checking with other cities the size of 10,000 or between 10 and 15,000. You know, what do they have? How do they operate? Those kind of things. Just kind of perspective, information from the League of Minnesota Cities. So to your point, Councilor Friedlieb, all that information will come together for us and to make a recommendation for further discussion as we move forward. So that just, I think that makes it more, and then everybody is on the same frequency, on the same page when it comes to this. This is an important position, as many of them are in the city, obviously, that when it comes to our level for discussion purposes. So I guess I'm looking for some guidance from the rest of the council how we move forward. I think the recommendation by staff and some preliminary discussions by some of the councilors here is that we schedule a personnel committee, the whole meeting, and set that up in a expeditious manner, but at the same time far enough out so it gives Britt the opportunity to have more information for us, along with Sherry, our finance HR director. So that being said, I'm looking for some council action. Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, I want to move that our administration set up a meeting date that is in the near future to discuss what we're going to do with the vacation of the lead engineering position, and do that as a committee of the whole.
Okay, very good. That's a motion by Councilor Bearable. Is there support for that?
Support.
Support by Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
I have no further items on the agenda, but I do have another item that I'm just preliminary like to bring up with you for your consideration at a future date.
Hey, Britt.
I have been approached by a party that is interested in putting, I believe it's cell towers or cell towers up in Midway on the Mulliver property that the city owns. I told him that I didn't know for sure, because my indication from the council is that we were holding it for residential development, but that I would discuss with you. Just something to put in front of your mind. I'll bring it back as a formal request later, but just something to start to consider
All right.
for a monthly lease.
Thank you, Britt. Appreciate it.
He will have to get a conditional use permit, so there will have to be public hearings, because that is not an approved use in that area. However, through cell phone towers, so very large towers.
There's towers out there now.
Would be farther down.
Farther
from-
down,
From there. On that property.
Yeah, on the property. Yeah. So thank you for that, Britt.
If there is some pros and cons, the neighbors will have to be notified, and they will have
We'll stay.
chance to give us their opinion.
Well, we'll stay tuned for additional information with respect to that. Councilor Johnson.
This is another topic, Mayor.
Please, Councilor Johnson.
As we're looking at what that position looks like, I just want to bring up something that we're aware of. One of the things that we've talked about for 4 years at least is residential rehab and the ability to, for people to purchase homes and make them nice. And I just want to express the frustration, and it's something that maybe we can look at as we're looking at the rental codes and property maintenance. My sister and her husband wanted to purchase a home in Virginia for $38,000, but a local bank would not give them a loan for less than 50, so they were unable to purchase the home. And that really brought a concern to my mind, that is that happening often within the city, and how do we help that moving forward? Is there something with the new position or with VITA or Revive or something that if we want people, young couples moving into our city that can afford to buy a home and fix it up, how do we help? And it was a local bank, it wasn't a national bank. How do we help those individuals be able to secure funding for a smaller home, which most of our homes that I would think a young couple would move into is not going to be more than $50,000. But how do we as a city support that as we move forward and figure out to get those young couples into town, so we're not an aging community anymore, so that we are a young community with young people raising families? So I just wanted to bring that up here now, so that as we're moving forward in the grand scheme of things, that's another economic development tool that possibly we could come up with. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I give Steve?
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Councilor Bearable?
Steve, there's a suggestion. I would have borrowed the 50,000. Okay, but.
They won't allow it. The bank will not allow it.
Well, I thought that you said the bank forced them to have $50,000 loan.
But they won't approve it for the home at the value of the home at $38,000.
Oh, okay. Even if
See, the
they.
conundrum here is how do we, because they were willing to take the $50,000 loans and use the extra to do the refurbishing and by all means, my brother-in-law is skilled to do this, but it's one of those things that I don't think it's another reason why we have a lot of abandoned homes. I think that might be a challenge as we're moving forward.
So that didn't include the cost of the rehab, though, the 38,000, just the price of the house, or was that? I would have tacked it on as a rehab cost. You wouldn't do that? There's something wrong with that bank. Because I've had other people I know that have actually done that. They borrow the value of the house and they borrow more to rehab and reconstruct. And if they don't need the money, they pay it in a lump sum back against the principal. So, I mean, I don't know, that doesn't sound right that that bank would do that. So they should go looking for another bank that will do the other opposite.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder, today at 4 o'clock, Britt and I will be meeting with Gethsemane Lutheran Church representatives. I'm sorry, I don't want to get this all mixed up all the time. Our Savior Lutheran Church, with respect to the direction that the council gave us with respect to the easement that's coming up. So we'll have a meeting today at 4 o'clock. And it's another reminder tonight, a dual council meeting at 6:30 between the City of Virginia and the City of Mount Iron with respect to the merging of the two fire departments. So before we adjourn for the day, I just want to go to Councilor Paulson if you have anything else you'd like to bring up before we adjourn. Okay, thank you. Councilor Beyondich? He's gone. Okay. One more quick announcement is if anybody knows where I can get some signs that I see all around town, support law enforcement and first responders, I'd certainly like to get a hold of a couple of those. So please don't hesitate to give me a call if you know where they're coming from. So thank you. Nothing else? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Britt.
Thursday at 6:30 PM, we do have the 2021 Street Improvement Project public hearing.
A public hearing, 6:30 at the Miners,
The miners in the main arena.
in the main arena. So again, please announce it one more time, Britt.
Thursday at 6:30 PM at the miners, the 2021 Street Improvement Project hearing.
Okay.
I believe all the residents have been notified, correct?
Have been all notified. We went above and beyond. We did not have to notify them individually, but I did that anyway.
Okay, appreciate that.
Everybody
Thank you,
understood
Brad.
that this was happening. Yes.
Okay, so 3 big events coming up today and this week. So thank you, everybody. Nothing else to come before the council committee of the home today. We had a full agenda, accomplished a lot as we usually do, and we will stand adjourned at 11:58 a.m. Thank you, everyone.